Hello. 3 minutes after 10 is the time. The former top civil servant due to give evidence in the COVID inquiry today, and I am still struggling to find a way into it for us. I feel we should be talking about it more. The revelations that are coming out, although for many people they are a mere confirmation of our worst fears rather than revelations, deserve more attention. They need more attention. And I find myself this morning in one of those places, one of those moments when I really recognise how bent our media is, because I try to swim if I can some mornings against the tide, but you can't change the tide. You can't turn the tide, as King Canute famously demonstrated. And when I'm rooting around for things to talk about, some days obviously it's a lot easier and a lot more obvious than it is on others. I'm still a seagull rather than a trawler almost every day. We're still following. I'm not sure we'll ever be able to change it, however hard we try. We're still following the sort of amorphous industry that sets the news agenda, that decides what a big story is, whether it is through front pages of newspapers or whether it's through the story leading a bulletin. Those of us who spend our time together, and this is you and me, this isn't just me, those of us who like to talk about issues in the news don't often determine what the news actually is. There are exceptions. I mean, during COVID, there were a couple of extraordinary moments where we were ahead of the news. We were ahead of the news on people working from home for the testing regime. Do you remember people ringing us to tell us they'd been on the payroll for 2 weeks without having done a single thing? So we've got very early indications of something going horribly wrong there. We were a bit ahead of the news on procurement when we took calls from people who were telling us they couldn't get through to the Department of Health, even though they were internationally renowned suppliers of ventilators. This, of course, while mates of members of government were getting VIP treatment and ushered straight to the front of the queue for lucrative contracts, even though they had no experience of delivering the stuff that they were being paid oodles of cash for. So it happens sometimes, but I can't get in it. I can't find the way in to the COVID inquiry in a way that would allow us to have a phone-in about it, for example, today. We will. I will. But if you've got any thoughts on it, then do drop them to at Mr. James OB on Threads or Twitter, and I will think on. But we're not looking at that today. I think, however hard I try to steer the conversation in a different direction, I think we're probably going to return this morning to where we were yesterday, because I think it is a moment of really quite epic importance, and I think it is perhaps going unremarked because of the incremental way in which the population, in which we have been conditioned to think that this sort of behaviour is somehow normal. But I think Suella Braverman has embarked upon what might be the single worst course that I have seen a senior politician undertake in my entire life. And I exclude Boris Johnson from that even, because he is an obvious idiot, being an idiot. There is something ridiculous and disgusting about him offering to be injected with COVID-19 live on television, or suggesting that perhaps a way to cure it would be to blow a hairdryer up your nose. But he is an idiot being an idiot, a narcissistic idiot who, being in charge at a time of such epic peril, was a national tragedy in every single imaginable way. But he was, as Dominic Cummings famously attests, like a shopping trolley with a wonky wheel. And no one is in control of a shopping trolley with a wonky wheel, least of all the people pushing it, which is, of course, Dominic Cummings' great tragedy. But there's something about what Suella Braverman is doing at the moment that is much more deliberate and therefore in many ways much more disgusting. I think I held back a tiny bit yesterday for fear, for hope of being wrong. Hope of being wrong. I had been in a television studio the previous night with Saeeda Varsi, the former chairman of the Conservative Party, who spoke in the strongest of terms about what her former colleague was doing and about the danger of the sort of divisive language and rhetoric that she'd introduced to a previously peaceful landscape. And this is a crucial point. I do not underestimate for a moment the fear that Jewish people feel, that many Jewish people feel when they see a large gathering of people who they believe or simply believe possible are somehow demonstrating solidarity with the terrorists of Hamas, with the murderous, bloodthirsty killers of October the 7th and other times. So if you hold that fear in your heart, I have unbounded sympathy for you. It must be horrible. And I think it would be patronizing and actually possibly even offensive to draw parallels between that emotional response and the observable evidence, because fear is not about observable evidence. Fear is visceral. Fear is, in the case of the Jewish experience, it's generational. And to see a large crowd of people who are calling for an end to a bombing campaign that has been launched in response to a terror attack, I can see how you could end up thinking that is somehow a conflation, that is somehow a failure properly to condemn the terror attack, or even in the darkest corners of our country, an expression of solidarity with the terrorists. And I respect your fear to the nth degree, but it's not true. It is not a march that is built upon a desire to either excuse or defend the actions of Hamas. It is a march, it is a protest, it is a gathering that exists entirely with some polluting elements, with some small polluting elements. It exists entirely to call for the bombing of Gaza to stop. Now, you could add comfortably and easily, please also stop firing rockets into Israel. I don't think it changes the tone, it doesn't change the conversation, it doesn't change the nature. And if there were a way of doing that would address the concerns of some people, I wish we could find that way of doing it. But the terror attack of October the 7th was over a month ago, and the people, the civilians, the children of the Gaza Strip are still being killed today. And that is why it is, although I understand the thinking behind it, it is unreasonable in the terms of the purest logic. It is unreasonable to expect people moved by the killing, by the massacre in Gaza, to somehow qualify their calls for a ceasefire according to other people's misgivings or concerns. That is what it is about. It is a call for an end to the killing. I think it's almost in brackets permanently that, of course, the ceasefire should go both ways. And I think everybody could agree it would be nice if the Israeli government seemed to care a little bit more about the hostages that are still in the middle of this mess. But the gatherings, there have been 2 or 3 already, and they have been, by the standards of mass marches or mass gatherings, whether it's the Countryside Alliance or Black Lives Matters or the racist march, the official racist march that happened a week after the Black Lives Matter march, by comparison with the poll tax protests or the student fees protests, these are not, they're not making the charts, these marches. They're just not. The context was peaceful. And the police were doing a fairly good job of finding the kind of scumbags who had pictures of hang gliders on their back, or identifying people who appeared to be expressing solidarity or support for prescribed groups, for terrorists. The police were doing all right. Some of the arrests, of course, were people directing violence, whether verbal or physical, at the actual protesters or at the peace marchers, I'm going to call them, I think, today, the peace marchers. And it was all going okay, with that fully understood fear among Jewish people that it represented something much nastier and much more sinister than the massive majority of people on the peace march actually intend. And then Suella Braverman came along and called it a hate march, and created in the minds of the public and much of the media, most obviously, I'm afraid, as always, the Daily Mail, who today, it's a headline that you can almost hear the smacking of lips at the prospect of violence on the front page of today's Daily Mail. Pray they don't end up with a riot at the Cenotaph. Do you know why there might be a riot at the Cenotaph? Because the police now fear that far-right groups and football hooligans represent the main risk of public disorder ahead of Remembrance Weekend. So this is what has happened, and this is what is actually, I know there's a danger of hyperbole, and I sometimes realise after the show that things were perhaps not quite as heady and not quite as heavy as I thought they were during my monologue or during my conversations with you. But this is absolutely hideous. And we're not clocking how hideous it is because we're caught up constantly in culture war or commentary or tribalism. But she has created this situation. You had an essentially peaceful context of public protest into which the Home Secretary, whose job is to preserve the peace, to promote harmony, to keep things calm, she has come along and very deliberately, with the help of the very right-wing media, in this case most obviously the Daily Mail, she has created in the minds of violent far-right thugs the belief, the bogus belief, that people going on a peace march on Saturday somehow hold the cenotaph or Remembrance Sunday or Armistice Day in contempt. She has done that. They did not do that. They did not say anything. They did not promise anything. They did not pledge anything. They did not announce anything. They are not going anywhere near the cenotaph. They're not on the streets until 2 hours after the 11th hour. On the 11th day of the 11th month has passed and been marked. The only way in which anybody has ended up believing that there is a opposition to the cenotaph, to Remembrance Sunday, to the commemoration, the only way in which anybody has ended up believing that is because the editor of the Daily Mail and the Home Secretary have told them that there is. Columnist in the Daily Mail today. My message to the ignorant snowflakes who desecrate Poppy Day and glorify Hamas. Nobody has desecrated Poppy Day. How can you send a message to people who don't exist? But what Sarah Vine is doing is sending a message to people who fancy a fight. Sending a message to people who will use the sacrifice of war dead to camouflage their own vile bigotries and violent tendencies, which is how today, as night follows day, Suella Braverman's interventions and incitements are followed by news that the police have identified far-right groups and football hooligans organising counter-protests to a peace march as the main risk of public disorder ahead of Remembrance Weekend. Sarah Vine, Suella Braverman, Ted Verity, the editor of the newspaper, Paul Dacre, the editor-in-chief, they have created a context in which people believe that the poppy is being desecrated, that the cenotaph is under threat, and that by calling for a cessation of the massacre of children in Gaza, you become a sympathizer with the murderous death cult of Hamas. They have created this. And I don't understand why. I don't understand why. Pray they don't end up with a riot at the cenotaph is the headline. It might as well call for a riot at the cenotaph. Nobody has spoken about a riot at the cenotaph. Nobody has called for a riot at the cenotaph. Nobody has posited the possibility of a riot at the cenotaph except the Daily Mail. So if you're a little Tommy Ten Names fan, sitting in your mum's back bedroom, in your dirty bathrobe, with your Tesco laptop, you're thinking, well, I'm going out, I'm not going to put up with this. And those are the people to whom Suella Braverman appeals. They're, if you like, the military wing of the rump of the Conservative Party that sees every brown-skinned person as a threat and believes that because the people in Gaza are Muslims, anybody marching in defence of their lives must somehow be a sympathiser with Islamist terrorism. And I think she has done it on purpose. 0345 60 60973 is the number you need to tell me why she's done it. Or to tell me that she hasn't. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. And if you find me 5 idiots, you don't get to claim that they represent 5 million any more than a paedophile radio presenter somehow represents every radio presenter in the country. It's quite incredible, the glee with which some people in public life have seized upon this misery and seen an opportunity to sow more discord, to sow more division, to malign already maligned minorities and ally people marching for peace with the murderous terrorists of Hamas. And I don't know why she's done it, but I'm pretty bloody sure she's done it on purpose. Tell me I'm wrong on 0345 6060 973. 22 minutes after 10. I think this might be a first for radio phone-in programmes, but I think I'm also going to ask you whether the Home Secretary is a stochastic terrorist. I should probably explain what stochastic terrorism is. It refers to political or media figures publicly demonising a person or a group in such a way that it inspires supporters of those political or media figures to commit a violent act against the target of the speech. So by calling peace marchers hate marchers, by bringing in the mythical threat to the scimitar, currently mythical. I think things are much, much more likely to kick off at the weekend now than they were before Suella Braverman opened her mouth or the Daily Mail front page started licking its lips at the prospect of violence. The stochastic terrorism comes in when words are used to publicly demonize a group in such a way that supporters of the politician or the media figure using the words becomes more likely to commit a violent act against the group. So you call peace marchers hate marchers, immediately a section of our society becomes more likely to launch violent attacks on that march, on those marchers. So I think Suella Braverman has indulged in an act of stochastic terrorism, and I would love you to persuade me otherwise. Alex is in Gatwick. Alex, what would you like to say?
James, that last statement you made is exactly correct. As I said to your researcher, I reckon it's going to kick off at the weekend. I was saying to her, I've got some really good friends that I've grown up with throughout the years, black and white. You know what I mean? These are the sort of people that you don't want to meet on a dark night out. You know what I mean? Because they are bad people at times. Yeah, they are. They've got good hearts. You know what I mean? They've just gone down the wrong sort. You
mean they
road,
like fighting? I mean? They like fighting.
They like fighting. Yeah. Some of them are into football. Some of them ain't. Some of them are into drugs. Some of them are sell drugs. They do their things to make ends meet. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But like at the moment, like our Snapchat, it's just blowing up with everybody like prepping for the weekend. You know what I mean? There's got, as I said, I've got my black friends and my white friends, and the common denominator is this trouble that's going to be coming this weekend. And I'm telling them, look, if I hear any of you going down there, I will tell the police, that you're going and you're coming down to make trouble. And obviously, there's more of them than me, and they know how serious I am because, like, I turned away from like gangs years ago to sort of like even phoning up your mystery hour show sometimes.
Is that a mark? That's the opposite of being in a gang, is it, Alex? I like that.
Yeah,
I'll take that. That's nice. I understand. When did it start? When did they start getting the idea that there was some call to arms almost underway?
This stupid person who calls herself a member of parliament. I don't know. I really don't know what this woman was thinking the moment she said what she said, like calling people hate marchers. Know what I mean? Whether one side's done something worse than the other, two wrongs don't make a right.
Ever.
But the language that she's using, just the pure language, she's just stirred up the wrong sort of people. Like, say, my black friends are sort of like saying, it's like the EDL and stuff, all the troubles that like we went through, going through like Peckham and Brixton and all the stuff going on there. You know what I mean? Like the Stephen Lawrence and all of that sort of thing. I'm sort of like saying, look at all that. What's going on with all of that? And then they're saying, oh no, it doesn't matter. We've got a common cause.
But they think they're protecting the poppy, do they? They're protecting Remembrance Sunday or Armistice Day on Saturday, or protecting the cenotaph from a threat that the media and the Home Secretary have persuaded them exists, despite there being no evidence.
I can't understand it. I feel like I speak to my white friends, so like from Essex. So that's where we all grew up.
Okay.
I can understand it more from their side. That they want to go and protect because of their English. They're English. You know what I mean?
I understand what you're saying.
Everybody. But it's like now my black friends and my white friends, they're all like joining together and sort of like planning coming down on Saturday and saying, no, we're not having none of this. You know what I mean? They should be doing it. Why can't they move it?
Listen,
because this woman is just stirring up trouble.
I mean, it's a remarkable call to take first, but I need to ask you, will they go looking for a fight?
If it doesn't, I reckon they'll position themselves around the cenotaph. But
so they'll be nowhere near the peace march then.
Yeah, but because they're already of that mindset, just like with the football hooligans of the years goes past.
Yes,
they're going down there in the mindset ready for trouble.
Yeah.
So if trouble doesn't come anywhere near them, what do you think they're going to do?
I don't know.
They know where those people are going to be, so they've got to just take themselves over there, and it'll just kick off there. If the police, are looking for a reason to either move things or shut it down, it shouldn't get shut down in my eyes. I reckon it should go ahead.
Yes.
But just for the peace of mind of every other person on the planet or in the UK, they need to do something about it.
And that relies on intelligence, doesn't it? It depends how much access police have got to the Snapchat exchanges like yours that are probably going on up and down the country.
They can phone me up straight and I'll tell them. So if any of my friends are listening to you now, I'm telling you again, through James O'Brien's show, if any of you guys turn up there, I will be offering your details up to the feds.
If only they'd all listen to Mystery Hour instead, Alex, eh?
They probably do.
Well,
everyone loves Mystery Hour.
Thank you also for bringing a bit of light into such a bleak analysis and such a grim, if you like, vindication of what we've been talking about for the last 2 days. It looks to me as if it is deliberate. You wake up this morning and read that the police are now more worried about football hooligans and far-right activists convening on the cenotaph than they are about the peace march that was scheduled to take place on the Saturday. I think it has, from Suella Braverman's point of view, until you persuade me otherwise, and now remember you've got to take Alex's testimony into your analysis as well. You've got to tell him that he's wrong. I think she's done it on purpose. I think this was the plan. And, there is a precedent. It's on the other side of the Atlantic. But an awful lot of what Suella Braverman comes out with seems to have been inspired from the other side of the Atlantic. The talk about homelessness and tents is rhetoric lifted entirely from Fox News. And the precedent for what Suella Braverman has done is January the 6th. She wants to create her very own Proud Boys as the racist thugs at the centre of attempts to overturn the last American presidential election are known. Many of them now, of course, on their way to jail, utterly abandoned by Donald Trump. I think that unless you can explain to me what she's done in a way that doesn't sound like incitement or stochastic terrorism, then that's where I'm sticking. 10:30 is the time. Thomas Watts has your headlines. 10:34 is the time. Nicholas Soames. I've never spoken to Nicholas Soames about how he feels regarding always being introduced as Winston Churchill's grandson. I mean, obviously in the context of the Second World War, there are few, but there are no greater associations really than with Sir Winston Churchill, who, like any historical figure, is grey. There are plenty of things on his CV that are suboptimal, to say the very, very least. But in the context of the Second World War, I'm afraid I slide very easily into undiluted praise and admiration. But it's a bit like constantly being introduced as someone's wife, isn't it? Or someone's husband. He's an MP in his own right for decades. But he is always, of course, Winston Churchill's grandson. And in the context of these conversations, the views of Winston Churchill's grandson assume a weight that would not be afforded to anybody else's grandson. And Andrew Marr was interviewing Nicholas Soames last night, and I found, as I always find Andrew's show, I found it riveting. I thought you might want to have a little listen to that.
My view, I'm afraid, it is not that of many people in my party. I think that a lot of people died during the war to assert freedom. And, because you may not agree or disagree with their views, and because it is very contentious and very difficult, it's going to put tremendous strain on the police. I think it must be allowed to go ahead. It's nowhere near the cenotaph. It's in the afternoon. It's afternoon, and most of those people, 90% of those people, are not there to make trouble. They're there to express a deeply held view. And I think it must be allowed to go ahead, and I think it would be a great mistake to play politics with it.
I mean, it's just true. It's just the correct thing, and it has already become a great mistake to play politics with it. We're going to stay with this probably for 2 hours, I think, looking at the agenda and the appetite to talk about it. But I have a lot to say because I need to represent everybody. I need to reach out to people who are unhappy with me. Such is the severity and the seriousness of the situation. As long as I believe that it is coming from a good place, that it is being offered up in good faith, I'll do my best to address it. So I'll start with you, Joan, if I may. If it were the case, as you allege, that the protests are benign and only about peace, why then no calls for the release of those kidnapped by Hamas terrorists, a prime casus belli for Israel, a cause of war? If you haven't got the Latin. Okay, I'll deal with that first. You know and I know that Benjamin Netanyahu is coming under more criticism from the families of the hostages than almost anybody else. A widespread belief that they are not doing enough to help the hostages. You might cite it as a prime cause of war for Israel, but many people don't believe that it is. But also, You don't get to tell. You don't get to say you're protesting against that, are you? Okay, why aren't you protesting against that as well? You're calling for a cessation of the killing of people in Gaza. You can't say if I was. How would you have felt when Hamas launched its murderous attack on October the 7th, if I'd come on the radio and said, yes, but what about all the people that are killed in Gaza? What about all the people that are killed by the IDF? What about all the people that have been killed by settlers? It wouldn't have been appropriate, Joan. We're dealing with an unfolding tragedy, not a completed one. And so you would have to go up to them individually and say, how do you feel about the kidnappers? But to say, how dare you protest about people being killed without also protesting about people who've been kidnapped, it's just not honest, although I do fully understand the place that it comes from. And I'll take your other comments. Also, what a disgusting comment to make, almost dismissing the murders of Jewish innocents because they happened a month ago. Are Jewish victims then so soon to be forgotten, and the Israelis should allow Hamas to fester in Gaza and prepare for another massacre? Well, you can't have it both ways, Joan. You know, either I mentioned them or I've forgotten about them. And when I said it happened a month ago, I was referring to the fact that massacre is over. Thank God. That massacre is over. Whereas the massacre of people in Palestine is still ongoing. So if you're going to call for an end to a massacre, again, I know it sounds brutal, but it is a form of whataboutery to say, well, why don't you call for an end to the massacre that's already ended? I've said from the very start, I refuse to feel sorrier about the death of one person in the Middle East than I do about another, according to what sign they were born under. But a lot of people in the Middle East feel massively different about the death of another human being according to what sign they were born under. So that doesn't stand either, but I appreciate the place that it's coming from. And, of course, the argument that by having a ceasefire you allow Hamas to regroup or reform is pertinent, and it is a reason to oppose a ceasefire. But it's not a reason to call for people who want a ceasefire to be silenced or criminalised or forbidden from calling for a ceasefire. That's all, Joan. I hope we can stay friends. But a lot of the stuff that I get doesn't stand up to logical scrutiny. And if I can do anything in this space by not being emotionally invested, by not having any historical loyalties to anybody or anything, I can at least try to bring in a bit of logical scrutiny. Which brings us back to Suella Braverman. And logical scrutiny of Suella Braverman makes it, in my opinion, almost impossible not to conclude that she has indulged in what is known as stochastic terrorism. A political figure publicly demonising a person or a group in such a way that it inspires supporters of that person to commit a violent act against the target of the speech. Here is a peace protest. Here is a Home Secretary who's called it a hate march. Here is a media that has completely fallaciously introduced poppies. Front page of the Daily Mail today talks about ignorant snowflakes desecrating Poppy Day and glorifying Hamas. Let's just imagine for a moment that you're not one of life's deep thinkers, but you feel a great swell of pride when you hear the national anthem or when you see a military veteran wearing his medals on television. You feel a great swell of pride. Sarah Vine today has told you that the country is full of people who desecrate Poppy Day and glorify the terrorists of Hamas. She is telling you the country is full of them because she's sending a message to them. She doesn't know any. She's never met any. She can't name any, but she's sending a message to them. Now, you're a fella who doesn't think too deeply about things. You're too busy getting on with it. And she's told you there's a bunch of people out there conflated deliberately with people marching for peace on Saturday. And you, quite understandably, aren't going to put up with that. You're going to get down there and you're going to bang some heads together. And they created it. And the rest of that front page, pray they don't end up with a riot at the cenotaph. You can hear their lips smacking from here. And it's not right. And we have to say so. Holly is in Derby. Holly, what would you like to say?
Hello.
Hello. Hello, Holly.
Hello. I hate Suella, whatever her name is. Don't even know her name.
Okay.
I think she's vile. A vile creature. I'm not even going to call her a human because a person that looks at other people...
Don't come down to the level of the person that you're criticising. She's obviously human. Her name is Suella Braverman. And hate can do as much damage to the person nursing it in their breast as it can to the person it's directed at.
When a person talks about other people the way she does, it just ignites. It's so horrible how this woman is allowed to be in our government the way, like, saying living in a tent is a choice. Are you dumb?
Yeah.
What do you mean, is it a choice? No, nobody chooses to live in a tent. What do you mean?
Yeah.
She's called these peaceful protests, these peaceful marches for innocent people in Palestine. I mean, every time I see pictures, sorry, I'm getting emotional.
That's all right.
It's vile how people can just support a genocide and like war crimes on innocent children and families. And it's so wrong how, like, these are peaceful marches. They are pro-Palestine, and I will be pro-Palestine until the day I die. It's so bad that they're calling them hateful because they're not. There are a few people, yes, I understand there were a few bad apples in these marches, and I understand that, and they shouldn't be there. But 98%, I would even come up to 99% of these marches are peaceful. They want a ceasefire. That's all we want. We don't want to see any more innocent people dying over an incident that happened a month ago. A month and a day, today, it happened. Now, people saying Israel have the right to defend themselves. Yes, they do, but defend themselves to what extent? How many more people have to die? How many more people have to suffer? And how many more children have to lose their lives and lose their family? And how many more people have to die? How many more? Suella, how many more? How many more is it 10,000 more? 20,000 more? How many more have to die until Israel go, you know what? We're going to stop now because we've had our retaliation. What do you mean they have the right to defend themselves? And what do you mean, do you condemn Hamas? I will not condemn Hamas until people start condemning the Israeli government for committing genocide and blatant war crimes.
Then you're as bad as they are. And you can condemn both if you want, but you don't. You have to condemn Hamas. How can you not condemn?
Obviously, I do.
Sorry,
I mean, what they did on the 7th of October was vile. It was wrong.
Did it move you as much? Did it move you as much as you were moved a moment ago? I'm sorry if that's an unfair question. It did me. I was broken on the morning of October.
So when I first saw it on the 7th of October, I didn't know what was actually going on.
Mm.
So I did what any other grown adult does, and I used Google, and I did research and to understand why this has happened, because obviously it's not just somewhat random, or maybe it was, but I wanted to understand before I made a comment or a judgment on it. So I did some research, and I spent a whole day researching things and reading things, and I understand that obviously this attack from Hamas was a vile attack, and it did make me upset, reading about it and understanding it. And then, obviously, when I've seen and read what's been happening in Palestine over the years, 50 plus years, that made me sad as well. And then
I hear you, and I understand what you're saying. Let me steer you back. Is there any chance, any analysis, any theory that doesn't essentially blame Suella Braverman for trying deliberately to make things worse?
She is.
She just is, isn't she?
She's just. There's no reason. There's no.
Because
answer.
even if you, because some people will object to your use of the word genocide, and it's important that I acknowledge them, and that some people will refer once again correctly to the fact that even if Israel stop their bombings now, then the missiles that are fired into Israel regularly will continue. There won't be a ceasefire in both directions. All of the caveats, all of the concerns, all of the points. You can make all of those points, but none of them detract from the fact that on the streets of Britain, the Home Secretary has turned up the risk level on purpose.
Oh, yeah, 100%. She's done it on purpose. So the demographic that she's pointing to, because there is a demographic that she's pointing to. She's not saying these things to say these things. She's pointing at a certain demographic that follow her ideologies and follow her ideas, and that's what she's pointing to. So she points to them. They're going to cause another. They're going to do a 6th of January. What happened in America?
When I say some days, I hope people will call me and tell me why I'm wrong. I do mean it, but I can't quite see how anyone's going to be able to do it today. And if you want me to join some of the dots that Hully's just plotted for you, then Samuel Kasuma, a former race advisor to Boris Johnson, who would have worked closely with all of these characters, has said in the last week that he's pretty sure that she is Islamophobic. Suella Braverman, I think his exact words were probably Islamophobic. So you're talking about the demographics that she's trying to turn people against. Well, there's your clincher. I don't know if it's the very first time, but it's certainly not a common occurrence for the phrase stochastic terrorism to be introduced to a radio phone-in programme. But if the cap fits, and I think it fits Suella Braverman, I very much welcome your attempt to tell me that it doesn't. But why would she call peace protesters, even if their numbers are polluted by a small number of scumbags, why would she call the whole event a hate march and thereby malign every single person on it, from a child in a pushchair through to a Jewish person calling for a cessation of the bombardment of Gaza? All of them are hate marches. Imagine looking at the January the 6th scenes in America and not feeling terror at the fragility of liberal Western democracy. Imagine looking at it and seeing opportunity. Imagine looking at it and feeling inspired. Imagine looking at Donald Trump and thinking, yeah, interesting, look how it is. As opposed to looking at Donald Trump and puking, which I think is the only natural, normal, decent response. But here we are. Here we are. Just to highlight one thing, Joseph, I'm not putting you in idiot's corner, but you provide a very helpful illustration of part of the problem. You write, nobody reasonable thinks the pro-Palestine marches in general shouldn't go ahead. However, marching on Remembrance Day is in such poor taste. I don't think it would be in poor taste, depending on the context of the circumstances of the march, but I think it's significant that you don't realise nobody is marching on Remembrance Day. That's on Sunday. And the planned peace march is on Saturday, which is actually Armistice Day. So if you want to stick with the point, then you put yourself in the position of saying it's in such poor taste to call for an armistice on Armistice Day, which is a logically challenging position to adopt, to say the least. I read out Joan's text earlier criticising me from the point of view of support for Israel, so I shall read out Dougie's as well for balance. How come your logical scrutiny always falls on the side of Israel? There's only one truth, mate. No colonisation, no war. A little simplistic, perhaps, Dougie, but it's always interesting to note that you're listening to the same radio show that Joan is listening to, and you think that I am speaking with undiluted support for Israel's bombing campaign in Gaza, whereas Joan thinks I'm very diametrically opposed to it and therefore morally delinquent. 10:53 is the time. Wax is in Leeds. Wax, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning, James. How are you?
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
Right, the cat fits. So, okay, let's have a look at this. Suella Braverman, I think it's a very self-interest and a personal interest for her. And you might ask me why. It's a selfish and personal interest because she's married to a Jewish gentleman who, I quote, is very proud member of the Jewish community. So I think you asked the question why.
Well, there's plenty of very proud members of the Jewish community who are not comfortable with what is happening in Gaza. So you need to be a little bit careful by making statements like that or reading too much into associations like that.
Yeah, I agree. And
if she is Islamophobic, as Boris Johnson's race advisor has suggested, it seems unlikely that just kicked in on her wedding day.
No. Well, I mean, the irony of the situation is we always consider Buddhist people to be very peaceful.
Yes, she is. She does say she's a Buddhist, doesn't she?
She's a Buddhist, right. So let's see what she's done here.
Yes, if you would, confine it to that, if you could. Thank you.
The far right have been very, very quiet on this issue,
and
they haven't said very much about it. However, the best way to incite the violence here, the cenotaph. I come from an unusual position, I think. My father fought during the Second World War. That's my father. He was born in 1914. I'm 50 now, the youngest of many children. My father was Muslim. I am Muslim as well.
Okay.
So I wear the poppy with pride. To me, we watch Remembrance Day. We watch every year, and it's something that makes us very proud.
You think of your dad.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that I'm very, very proud Brit.
Yes.
So
yes.
Here, what's gone on here? She's done it on purpose. She's done it because any Brit would want to protect situation. What's going to happen is, from previous history, when there is far right marches, there's always a violent element to that. They are the old bother boot individuals, if you remember that.
Yes.
So here,
well, back in the day, I mean, actually, oddly, the far right do convene at the Cenotaph every year, but Suella Braverman's never called that a hate march.
Well, there we go. So I think it's being done on purpose. It's to stoke the situation up, and what will happen is, even if there wasn't going to be anything, boys are going to go down. They're going to kick off. And what will happen is, do you expect young ones who are there peacefully marching, because that's so far, unless anybody tells me otherwise, there's only be a handful of arrests. So if you're going to get attacked, which sounds familiar, do you think the young ones might react? And there she will turn around and say, exactly, this is what I expected.
I think you're right, mate. I think you're right. I mean, if it wasn't for the last few years of British politics, I'd think, how can it be so obvious and yet also be something that she's probably going to get away with? And you just turn to the best-selling newspaper in the country, the Daily Mail, which is effectively, if Suella Braverman is a motorbike, then Sarah Vine's in the sidecar. You know, they're just it's completely in cahoots. My message to the ignorant snowflakes who desecrate Poppy Day and glorify Hamas: Wax, mate, Wax. Have you seen? They're going to desecrate Poppy Day and glorify Hamas. We've got to get down there, mate. And you can see why people would respond to that by going, yeah, we do.
Do you know what? If they were going to do that, I'd be the first one there to protect it.
Well, precisely. And there you are, a poppy-wearing Muslim son of a war hero. Which is, you don't exist, I don't think, in Suella Braverman's worldview, mate. I just don't think you exist.
No. I think she needs to remember that they are peaceful protests. And like I said, the statistics aren't there. There's not been any real violence of any kind that I'm aware of, unless somebody corrects me on that particular point. It's just rhetoric. It is all about how they paint a picture. And they're trying to do what they always do, which is to get someone else to do the fight for them, so that, there we go, then, you've got it. She's guilty of terrorism.
And I wonder which way it will cut as well. Thank you, Wax. I wonder which way it will cut. I wonder whether some people are now going to be less likely to go along. I think there'll be people in both categories, less likely to go on to call for peace because they worry about being tarred as hate marchers, and then some people who are going to be more likely to go along now because they reject absolutely the label of hate march and don't want to let it stand. She's taken a terror attack and an incredibly lethal military response. She's taken the deaths of thousands and thousands of people and turned it into a moment of political opportunism. Look, we've all got to come up with material. I'm moving now from Suella Braverman to Sarah Vine in the Daily Mail. It must be tough being a columnist with only 3 ideas in your head. You've got to come up with 2 or 3 columns a week that ostensibly look a little bit different every day. But to sit there, off the back of the October the 7th atrocity and the subsequent massacre of tens of thousands of Palestinian people, including the most innocent people on the planet, including children, And to think, do you know what we really need to do with these flames of discord? We need to throw petrol on them now. That's what Suella Braverman has done. That's what Sarah Vine has done. That's what the editor of the Daily Mail has done. And even after all the years of chronicling the madness of our national decline and the way in which people who prioritise attention and celebrity almost over everything else while claiming to be patriots, the people that love the division, the people that thrive upon the enmity, even having chronicled it all for 7, 6, 8 years, this week, man, this week's the worst. Seriously, this week is the worst, and Suella Braverman is the worst because it's deliberate. And every time you think maybe it isn't, you remember the time that she told a Holocaust victim to sit down and stop criticising her language. It is 3 minutes after 11, and a Great Minds Think Alike page who has texted just during that last news bulletin that the other element to take away from this is the weakness of Rishi Sunak. It all shows how awful and or weak Sunak is as well. He either agrees with her or is afraid to sack her. And I think we'll add that question to the dimension. Can we get Starmer's little speech from yesterday when he was talking about the Home Secretary? I wish you could see it. I wish you could see it because I think it's fascinating, the body language. Normally, if the leader of the opposition starts slagging off a senior cabinet minister, they all sort of laugh together. They meet each other's eyes. There's a sort of an almost visible bonding exercise underway on the opposite front bench. So Starmer starts slagging off Jeremy Hunt. Hunt and Sunak sort of almost nudge each other, and then they'll give it, come and have a go if you think you're hard enough. You've seen it a million times, right? I know you mostly listen to PMQs. There's no PMQs today. Don't ask me why. I think they're on flexi time. The bonding on the front bench is clear. It's normally an absolute given. Opposition spokesman starts attacking a government spokesman. The government bench closes ranks. There we go. We got there in the end. That was the phrase I'm looking for. They close ranks visibly, verbally, loudly, quite often. And if a government member starts attacking a front bench opposition member, the opposition front bench closes ranks. If you can watch what Sunak was doing and what Braverman was doing when Keir Starmer was just really producing the receipts of her recent behaviour, it was absolutely fascinating because he almost, to my mind, or to my eyes, he was almost physically leaning away from her. I watched it a couple of times because I'm weird. I watched it a couple of times and there was a physical, I mean repulsion would be the wrong word, except in the context of magnets. You know when you turn a magnet and you can't push them together, they repel. The opposite of magnetize is repulsion. If you watch it, I'll play you the words in a moment because they're powerful, but to really appreciate the impact of what I'm talking about, you kind of have to see the pictures. He was literally, Fiona saw it as well. She wrote, he was literally leaning away from her, James. He really was. He was physically leaning away from her. And there was absolutely no engagement between the two of them. She didn't turn to him and roll her eyes as if to say, oh, I wish this clown would shut up. He didn't nudge her and say, crikey, you've really got under his skin, haven't you? He looked, I know, could be reading too much into it. Of course we could. But he did look as if he wanted to be anywhere but there. And then, of course, the question of why would she be sitting next to him on the front bench anyway? That is the arithmetic of the King's Speech. That is the tradition of the King's Speech. That the most senior holders of offices of state will be there. But I think you should have a look at it. I think you should have a look at it. And I will play you the words shortly. 6 minutes after 11 is the time. But the question that prompts is this question. So we're sticking with the stochastic terrorism angle. Of course we are. What has she done this on purpose? Is she? And then we'll add a why to it. Why does Suella Braverman apparently want violence on Armistice Day? Why does she want it? 03456060973. You can still tell me that she doesn't, but we've been asking that question for an hour and nobody yet is prepared to have a crack at trying to claim that her actions and words in recent weeks do not speak to a desire for violence on Armistice Day. That's why I've reached for the big stochastic terrorism. label. So you've got that. That's a given. Feel free. But working on the premise that nobody can actually cast her actions in a way that doesn't look like incitement or stochastic terrorism, you're left with the question of why. Why is Suella Braverman doing this? Why is Sarah Vine doing it? Why is this Daily Mail front page apparently relishing the prospect of violence on Saturday? 0345 6060973. And then the question I'd really like you to get a crack on as well is, why has Sunak not sacked her? When would you have sacked her? Well, you wouldn't have given her job back after she was fired for breaching the ministerial code, leaking sensitive material. Both deliberately to her mentor, the bloke who talks about cultural Marxism all the time, but also accidentally leaking sensitive material to somebody who wasn't supposed to see it at all. And that is why she was slung out of Liz Truss's government. But 4 days later, Rishi Sunak brought her back. So, I mean, it's a given that you wouldn't have done that. I'd have sacked her when Joan Salter, the Holocaust survivor, said, please stop using this sort of language to talk about refugees. It reminds me of the language the Nazis used while they were murdering my family. And Suella Braverman said no. I'd have sacked her then, I think. I sacked her when she talked about homelessness being a lifestyle choice, or posited the idea of fining charities for giving tents to homeless people. I mean, there's just too much to choose from. So why hasn't he sacked her? A lot of you have picked up on this. I noticed the same thing, says Gerald, but I think she had a face of glee. Sunak was looking at the sky when Starmer finished, James. When Starmer was talking about Suella in Parliament yesterday, Sunak's expression was very interesting, James. He was looking at Starmer as if he was absorbing and agreeing with every word. John in Exeter says it was almost as if Braverman was a cloud of halitosis. And quite a lot of people are of a similar view to me. I'll pick this up again if you want. How can you say it was a month ago? This is current. I can say it was a month ago because it was. I fully sympathise if this is difficult. I don't want to say difficult to understand, but that sounds patronising. I say that the October the 7th terror atrocity, for which I hope the perpetrators burn in hell for all eternity, was a month ago now, because it is now November the 8th. So it is literally just counting. And you can't march on Saturday to call for it to end. That's all. I'm not sure that I need to explain this any further. I think if you can't understand what I'm saying now, that's a you problem, not a me problem. But the terror atrocity was a month ago, and you can't march on Saturday in calling for it to end, or indeed to in the hope of it never happening. You can march on Saturday calling for a ceasefire, calling for a cessation of the bombardment of Gaza and the firing of missiles into Israel. But you can't march on Saturday calling for Hamas to stop massacring Israelis on October the 7th. That's all. And it was a month ago. How can you say it wasn't? There you go. I hope that helps. 10 minutes after 11 is the time. Here it is. Here's the speech. But I'm clearly not going mad, because pretty much every message that's come into the studio for the last 5 minutes, is describing precisely the physical language, body language that I saw here. I think we'll run with Ian's. Sunak behaves as if Suella Braverman is halitosis in human form.
Today was a missed opportunity. We needed a King's speech that would draw a line under 13 years of Tory decline, a King's speech for national renewal and a serious plan for growth. But instead, we have a party so devoid of leadership, it is happy to follow a Home Secretary who describes homelessness as a lifestyle choice. And believes that the job of protecting us all from extremists, the most basic job of government, is legitimate terrain for her divisive brand of politics. Mr. Speaker, as Director of Public Prosecutions, I worked closely with the police and counter-terrorism forces. Their job is hard enough already without the Home Secretary using it as a platform for her own ambitions. So I say to the Prime Minister, think very carefully about what she is committing your government to do. And think very carefully about the consequences of putting greater demands on public servants at the coalface of keeping us safe. Yes. Because without a serious Home Secretary, there can be no serious government, and he cannot be a serious Prime Minister.
And the physical recoiling is a great word, isn't it? Sunak almost recoiling from his Home Secretary as Starmer spoke. And I don't know that I saw glee on the face of Suella Braverman, but I certainly saw no closing of ranks on the front bench, which, of course, begs the question, why does he tolerate her? Because the perception has to be that he agrees with her. Dina's in Cheltenham. Dina, what do you think's going on?
Well, she's got her eyes on the prize, I think. I think she wants to be world extreme right-wing leader. Thanks, James, though, for teaching me something today. I had no idea that she was a Buddhist.
No, well, it wasn't me that said that. It was Wax, I think, up in Leeds, or one of the other callers. I mean, what does it mean, though? I mean, it seems unlikely that she's practicing the teachings of Buddha on a daily basis any more than Jacob Rees-Mogg practices the teachings of the Catholic faith with regard to the poor on a daily basis. So these are mere labels often, aren't they?
Yeah, I'd love to know if Buddhists relate to the prophetic teachings and wisdom of Suella. No, I think she's just got one aim, isn't it? And it's to give Rishi Sunak a run for his money, and she wants to be leader.
She wants to be the front runner for the very right wing when the next leadership election comes along. That's becoming obvious, I think. So why does he keep her there then?
I think he needs people on side now more than ever, if the polls are anything to go by. And she's goading, she's provoking, there's no surprises there, are there, really? Your previous question about when would you fire her, I don't think it would be as recent as her comments about lifestyle choices for the homeless. For me, it would go back to her wanting immediate flights to the democratic state of Rwanda.
Dreaming of it. Listen, there's a case for offshore processing of asylum applications, but that's not what the Rwanda plan is. A lot of people still misunderstand that. And it was the idea of dreaming about it that was just, I think the word is weird. You dream about it. Even if you're going to have to introduce something that you and I would find we would believe to be unnecessary, you would at least think of it with a heavy heart, or at least think I should pretend to have a heavy heart. But to blatantly say I'm dreaming of the Daily Telegraph front pages showing that genuine refugees and asylum seekers are being deported to a place where very, very recently refugees were being shot dead for protesting about their food rations. She's dreaming about it.
Absolutely. I don't know if I want to get inside her warped mind, to be honest. No. It actually made me think of George Martin, the author of Game of Thrones. I don't think he could concoct such an evil character. I really don't.
I bet he could, actually,
anyway.
Just to quibble. I bet he could. But there it is. And the question of why he won't get rid of her is simply because it would cause him more problems than she's currently creating.
It would cause more division, definitely.
Quickly, though, because I'm late for the break as usual.
I just wanted, it's something that one of your previous callers touched on. I just want people to think about who has been on these protest marches that have been, for the large part, and it has been reported, predominantly peaceful. My family has been on all of them. Right. That a lot of the protesters are actually Jewish. And I want people to think about that. The reason that they're marching are for humanitarian reasons. Yes. They care about all children. They care about all displaced people, all people that don't have a voice. So I don't want to just hear this narrative that it's Hamas supporters, which it isn't. It's for people who want to be the voice of those that don't have a voice, and for people that genuinely are humanitarian.
That's beautifully put, and it's sad it's necessary. It's sad you feel the need to say it, but I completely understand why you do, and I probably agree that you should. Saeed Avasi been incredibly strong on this as well, of course, former chair of the Conservative Party, talking about these postures, the posturing that she engages in, that Braverman engages in, and using the word dangerous, I think, and it just is, and yet people lap it up. I haven't heard much lapping That's a weird thing. I know that the usual suspects are kicking off about it and telling all their knuckle-dragging mates to come down to the cenotaph on Saturday. That's hate. Turn up, there's going to be a fight on one side, and turn up a mile away, there's going to be a peace march on the other. That's the fight. Those are the battle lines that Suella Braverman has drawn. But who would actually put their hand up and say, I love this stuff? I encounter a bit of it on Twitter. You'll come across somebody saying, yeah, she's right. And then, of course, you can't engage. But if you did, you'd say, do you have any evidence for this? And they'd say, yes, there was some chants at the march, or there were two people with hang gliders on their back, or there were some banners that were disgusting. And you say, I completely agree with you. But your evidence that everybody there is embarked in an act of hatred, what's the evidence for that? And there isn't any. There isn't any at all. Why is he keeping her there then? 11:18 is the time. 21 minutes after 11, you can see the clip I played you a moment ago in glorious Technicolor on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk. Just the body language intrigues me. I'm a bit of a political anorak. The broader question of why Rishi Sunak keeps such an obviously toxic Home Secretary in place is one that we're addressing now, but we probably should have included the analysis that she's trying to get sacked. I think that's feasible. I think that's perfectly plausible. I know sometimes we talk about whether or not there's a sort of sinister master plan in place, or whether it is just a sort of cacophony of chaos. And usually it's a cacophony of chaos. In fact, I think the most frenzied conversations we had, or the most fretful conversations we had about whether or not there's a sinister, or whether or not there's a master plan in place, whether sinister or otherwise, versus nope, it's absolute chaos, was during COVID. And we had to cling to the notion that there was actually some sort of plan in place. And then we got spooked by the idea that the plan was actually to let it run through the population like a dose of salts and let the bodies pile high. Confirmation yesterday that Boris Johnson did, in fact, deploy that very phrase, despite denials and denials and denials. Denial there just keeping the Middle East theme alive in today's programme. And you sort of look at that, and you look at the unfolding of it, and you think, yeah, maybe she is actually. Maybe there is a plan. Maybe she wants to get fired, because that would create a slightly different momentum for her next bid at the leadership of the Conservative Party. James Cleverly's the one that's pulling ahead. I told you this would happen. James Cleverly's tactic is to do nothing. Do nothing to draw attention to himself. Suella Braverman's tactic is the polar opposite. So they're the two holders. Hunt's never going to be leader of the Tory. Well, listen to me. Who knows what could happen? But as things stand, Hunt is never going to be leader of the Conservative Party. Cleverly and Braverman will be front runners in the event of Sunak's disappearance after a putative defeat at the next general election. Cleverly doing very, very little. He's keeping all his appointments, making all his meetings. He's not even got the stones to call for the release from prison of Jimmy Lai, a British citizen imprisoned by the Chinese in Hong Kong for the crime of publishing a newspaper. He's not even got the stones to call for that. So he's just doing everything on the down low, Cleverly. And he's now gone to the top of the regular poll of Conservative members over who's got the highest approval ratings. Liz Truss was there for years, and we couldn't work out why until we suddenly realised that these poor souls believed her when she told them the trade deals that she was signing were brilliant, or a big deal, or something that couldn't have been done outside the European Union. To get to the top of the Conservative Party, to become leader of the Conservative Party now, you need the unstinting support of people who believe that black is white, people who believe that up is down, people who have been so completely boiled by Brexit and Boris Johnson that they've lost their grip on the truth entirely. Best proof of that, probably, is that one of their poster girls would be Nadine Dorries. And Nadine Dorries has written a book which David Icke, a man who believes that the late Queen was a lizard. David Icke has cited Nadine's latest effort, which is non-fiction. She's been cited by David Icke as proof of everything he's been arguing for years. And I mean, you will still get people in this profession who treat it with a modicum of respect. When the bloke who thinks the Queen is a lizard says this book proves I'm right about everything, it's probably time to give your head a wobble. 25 minutes after 11 is the time. Speaking of books, I have some rather good news about mine, which I may share with you later. How They Broke Britain. I'll tell you now, it's the 5th best-selling book on Amazon all of last week. That means Arnold Schwarzenegger, Britney Spears, Billy Connolly, I think, Matthew Perry, and then me, which is a bit mad because we all have to go out for dinner together on Friday night. Obviously not Matthew, but the rest of us will be breaking bread at the weekend. 26 minutes after 11. Apparently Arnie pays, even though Britney's come top. Back to the phones. Why won't you sack her? Harry's in Durham. Harry, what would you like to say?
Hiya, James.
Hello,
I'm chuckling here. You want to read your book instead of writing it.
That's a very good idea.
The answers are all in there.
Thank you.
I'm up to chapter 4 at the moment. Anyway,
Yes.
in the introduction, you mentioned Suella Braverman.
This is my kind of call, Harry. You fill your boots, mate.
Didn't she resign, or wasn't she sacked or something some
Yes.
time ago?
Yes, she was, for leaking sensitive information both to an ally and to an accident.
Yeah, remind me who appointed her in her current role.
Well, it was Rishi Sunak, of course,
Yeah, so why is he going to sack her?
because it would make him look silly again. He just sort of put her in a position. Most people sacked by prime ministers have also been appointed by the same prime minister. No.
Yeah, but they also have a few minerals as well, and Rishi's proved that he has none. This is nothing more, as one of your previous callers said, James, this is nothing more than another play by Braverman for the leadership of this vile right-wing bunch of cretins. You know, I said to your researcher,
Producer.
I had the misfortune of living through the Thatcher era,
Right.
up in the northeast here, when most of the lads that I'd gone to school with and had lost their jobs had to move to London and Germany and other places to find work. She destroyed the northeast, and I honestly thought I would never see a Conservative government as right-wing, nasty and vile as that shower. And in fact, this lot knock them into a cocked hat.
Well, some of them do. I mean, she
yes,
is... she-
absolutely,
Yes,
James. Yes,
yeah.
some of them do. Yes.
And the ones that don't stay silent and therefore become complicit. Where does Sunak sit on that scale, do you think,
I don't
Harry?
know. Do you know, there's a mate of mine who often says you can either be a Conservative or decent, but you can't be both.
I don't agree with that personally.
No,
but
I don't, and I argue with him, and I say no, there are decent people in the Conservative
Yes.
Party. I may not agree with their politics.
That's
or
it exactly.
their
People
policies.
you can have a civilised disagreement with.
Absolutely. But unfortunately, again, another plug for your book, as you mentioned many, many times.
Oh, yes.
In
This
just
sounds
the
very
bit that I'm
interesting.
up to now.
Yes.
You know, they've just shifted completely to the right, and the people who we may describe as decent, they've got nowhere to go. They just sit back. They know they're going to be absolutely routed at the next election. So there's nothing in it for them to speak out now. Nothing in it whatsoever.
What are they fighting over? They're fighting over a future in which the party is even further to the right than it is now.
But that doesn't bother them.
What if it's not?
Interest.
What I mean, is there no chance? It's going to depend so much on personnel. We should probably get someone to crunch these numbers and look at the seats, because the party is going to be defined by who survives. This is presuming there is a route, which I, for one, am not putting any money on, Harry. The world is a strange place, and stranger things have happened. But let's say there is a route. Let's say that there is a swing of 1997 proportions. Then much is going to hinge upon who's left. How much of the surviving Conservatives are closer to Suella Braverman than Sir Nicholas Soames, for example, or closer to 30p Leenock than they are to, let's say, Jeremy Hunt or even James Cleverly. But so I don't know what the party's going to look like in its next iteration.
James, I was a journalist for 30 odd years, so I have a large interest in politics. I did political journalism for a while. We won't go into that, but my wife thinks I'm really sad because I sit up and watch election night, general election night, just hoping to see the Tories get absolutely decimated.
Okay.
That's what I'm going to be doing next year. You think that the Blair landslide was something? The next one is going to be seismic in comparison.
It depends on how many people like what they're hearing, for example, today. And I think we've probably become a place now where people who are loving Suella Braverman are unlikely to ring in, which is unfortunate. It's just the price you pay for popularity in the other direction. You know, you become something of a gathering ground for people who find this toxicity repellent, and the people who love it are probably feeling a little bit squeezed out of the conversation. But, you know, if you want to ring in and tell me why you think Suella Braverman's wonderful, I'd love to hear it. 0345 6060 973. Thank you, Harry. We'll talk about your journalism another time, but it adds a new dimension of gratification to the kind words you had to say about the book, about how they broke Britain. Available in all good bookshops and all mediocre bookshops and even bad bookshops right now. Someone says it doesn't arrive until the 2nd of May. I'm putting you in idiot's corner, but affectionately, because you've accidentally ordered the paperback, you prune. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. 11:35 is the time. You remember my sort of weird meanderings about seagulls and fishing trawlers? It's sort of a homage to Eric Cantona. Most journalists are seagulls, but I don't know what the fishing trawler is. The fishing trawler is also journalists or journalism, but it's always slightly gratifying to feel a tiny bit ahead of the curve. So the heat is now on the Prime Minister with regard to Suella Braverman. And while we've been talking about the reasons behind his failure to sack her, and indeed the body language yesterday when he appeared to be almost physically repelled by his proximity to her on the front bench while Keir Starmer listed the catalogue of her recent abominations, it is also the main line of questioning that the Prime Minister has been exposed to during a pooled clip today, which is when he does one interview with one journalist, which is then shared with everybody for wider dissemination. And I think, given that we're in the middle of a conversation about precisely these issues, it's probably worth listening to in its entirety.
Now, your Home Secretary has made comments about homelessness being a lifestyle choice in some cases, and those comments have caused a lot of anger. Will a restriction on tents be involved in the criminal justice bill?
Well, I don't want anyone to have to sleep rough, and I'm proud of the government's track record over the past few years in tackling that. We're investing £2 billion, and the number of people rough sleeping is down by a third since the peak. And thanks to our Homelessness Reduction Act, which is a piece of legislation we passed a little while ago, over 600,000 people have had their homelessness or rough sleeping either alleviated or prevented. But there's always more we can do. That's why we'll keep working at it. We said earlier in the year that we didn't want anyone to be criminalised for not having somewhere to live, and that's why we were going to repeal something called the Vagrancy Act, which is an outdated piece of law from the 1800s. And at the same time, as part of that plan, we want to make sure that intimidating or violent conduct, that the police do have the powers to tackle that.
Do you agree with Suella Braverman's comments?
As I said, I don't want anyone to have to sleep rough, and that's why I'm proud of the government's record in investing a huge amount of resources to reduce the number of people sleeping rough, down by a third since the peak. But there's more we can do, and that's why we'll keep working at it to give people the support that we need.
Supporting you or undermining you?
So what the Home Secretary and the government is doing is focus on people's priorities, and that's making sure that we continue to cut crime, which is down by 50% since 2010, tackle antisocial behaviour. The King's Speech that we announced yesterday contains new bills to make sure the police have the powers they need to keep us safe, new powers, and that criminals get the punishments they deserve, and that life will mean life for the most serious crimes. You know, that's the government's agenda on criminal justice, as well as stopping the boats. And the number of illegal migrants crossing into this country is down by over a quarter this year, and it shows that the plans are working.
The Met Police don't currently think it should be banned. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, this is a decision that the Metropolitan Police Commissioner has made, and he has said that he can ensure that he safeguards remembrance for the country this weekend, as well as keep the public safe. Now, my job is to hold him accountable for that, and we've asked the police for information on how they will ensure that this happens. And I'll be meeting the Metropolitan Police Commissioner later today to discuss this, and more broadly, you know, my view is that these marches are disrespectful, and that's what I'll be discussing with the Police Commissioner later today.
But it's a march calling for armistice on Armistice Day.
As I said, this is a decision by the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, and he said that he can safeguard remembrance and keep the public safe from disorder. My job is to hold him accountable for that, and I'll be meeting him later today to discuss this.
hold him accountable for that, and also calling them disrespectful. I don't quite follow that. I really don't follow how calling for peace on Armistice Day is disrespectful. So, and I listen, I won't put anyone in idiot's corner necessarily, but I don't believe you sometimes when you text me, especially if you lack the courage to ring in. If it is courage, it may be you're very busy driving a bus or something, but or an aeroplane. The idea that there's something fundamentally wrong about calling for peace on a day that commemorates peace and sacrifice, I don't believe you, Rishi Sunak. I think that you think people want to hear you say it's disrespectful, but you can't explain why. Good job done there by that journalist. But if she were to have gone off in a different direction, as she made the point about calling for an armistice on Armistice Day, that the question would have been, why is it disrespectful? Obviously, the people doing disrespectful things in the context of a peace march are disrespectful, but how can the whole march be defined by disrespectful behaviour? So you can't mean that. You can't be claiming that, 1% or 10% of a crowd define its nature, because you're not stupid, Rishi Sunak. So if you're not claiming that a minority defines a majority, then what are you claiming? How is it disrespectful? I don't know. And I don't know why he keeps her in her job. The Guardian picks up on this theme today. It quotes one former Conservative minister as saying it's as if she wants to be fired so she can get on with the leadership bid. If she's tied to the government for too long, she will have to carry some of the blame for Rishi's failure, and few people think he'll win another election outright. Another former Tory frontbencher tells the newspaper that she is employing a self-preservation strategy, which is not going down well inside the parliamentary party, outside of the 40 or so MPs who might support her. Colin Bloom, we mentioned yesterday, former director of the Conservative Christian Fellowship, said Braverman was goading Sunak into sacking her. It is not just that it is the comments about people sleeping in tents. I think she is goading Number 10 into getting rid of her because she wants to launch her leadership campaign, he told the BBC's Newsnight. And also from the same people, former ministers and current Tory insiders, the suggestion that these deliberate, unauthorised statements on homelessness, demonstrations and multiculturalism simultaneously appear to the party's hard right base and make Rishi Sunak look weak. Jeff's in Norwich. So am I tonight, Jeff.
Oh, fair play to you. Lovely place.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it. It's just the journey home I'm dreading. I might sound a little tired on the programme tomorrow. What made you pick up the phone?
Well, everything going on recently. I mean, I know this is going to be a full circle. I'm going to go back to Johnson.
Okay.
I think the right-wing stuff started that he was always like a rubbish version of Trump. Right, then you had Truss, now Sunak.
Yes.
And I remember then there was supposed to be an Islamophobia inquiry into the Conservative Party.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
Their response to that was, and forgive me for this, but the people that just see colour, they see brown people in prominent positions. So how the hell can we possibly be racist or whatever?
Yes,
but
I
those
think
brown
you're right.
people,
yes.
The brown people in power still are not of the Muslim faith, as far as I'm aware. But the ones that were, Sajid Javid, Baroness Farsi, they've gone, and they're actually, Javid wouldn't have put up with it, would he? When he was Chancellor.
No, and indeed,
and that's how soon it got in.
Lady Varsi did describe the inquiry you're alluding to as a complete whitewash. It was her that called for it first.
Exactly, and they're both actually prominent Muslims,
yes.
And they're no longer there. So what does that say? Firstly,
all
the brown people that are
could
in,
say so. No, all right, I hear
positions.
you.
And it's back to Braverman then. So it sort of goes all out. I think because it was mentioned earlier by one of your callers about she's got a Jewish husband, a very prominent Jewish husband.
Right.
I think she is goading. She's just being absolutely over the top and gross with what she's coming out with in everything.
Yeah, but mate, I've
with.
got Jewish friends and I've got friends with Jewish husbands, and they're nothing like Suella Braverman. Well, go on then, draw the line quickly because I don't like it.
Draw the line quickly is because I think she wants to get sacked, so that same anti-Muslim or the Jewish people or the Jewish right-wing side of it, they've got...
you don't need to say Jewish. Islamophobia is...
But the right-wing then, right-wing. But it was the anti-Semitism thing. I'm talking about the Labour Party at the same time. They brought down Corbyn.
Right.
And it was like Johnson was the option. And that's even come out in the COVID inquiry. That was the only reason it was option to stop Corbyn.
Okay.
And I think now, I've seen on YouTube yesterday, migrants armed to the teeth, video, right, armed. And so that's why now I'm comparing that. If it does kick off, God forbid that this weekend, I think it's very close to what the insurrection was with Trump.
So you're looking at a January the 6th style moment.
And I can see it happening now. And the people that are, are saying they're going to be protecting the cenotaph and all the rest of it, that's
what have they got to lose? The hard right of the Tory party. They're widely considered to be facing electoral oblivion. They don't have any particular heroes to gather around. They can't point at any great successes of the last 13 years. They got what they wanted in 2016 with Brexit, and it's all fallen apart in their hands. Their last big hero, Boris Johnson, who was always slightly playing the role of their leader. I don't think he was sympathetic to all of their madness.
They knew of before, but still put him in.
Yeah, well, exactly. So it's all fallen to pieces. Why not just kick everything off and see what happens?
That's exactly what I think they do. Because they did it with Johnson. All these little lies that he says. It's just the media now are picking up on these lies now. I think there's something like 8% of stuff on the internet from the Tories in the Corbyn election was lies. There's a video on YouTube where all the lies have been put together.
No, I know. I've seen it, and
they just lie to
well, we're in alternative facts territory, Jeff. We're in alternative facts territory, the British equivalent of what Trump's press spokesperson Kellyanne Conway called alternative facts, with a completely straight face. The idea that it somehow, well, okay, you might think the Earth is round, but other people think it's flat, and therefore there are alternative facts. Jeff alluded there to the COVID inquiry, which I am very keen to catch up on, so we will after this. Okay, 11:49 is the time. Let's have a bit of fun. I say fun. I use the word very loosely. I wonder if you remember this from the toing and froing between Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer in the earlier days of COVID, because I played this clip to you at the time, and I said to you, "Oh, that's interesting. Starmer has pinned that down for future reference." Now, it's moot in many ways now, because the idea that Johnson would lie to the House of Commons has been proved beyond doubt, and it is part of the reason why he is no longer a Member of Parliament, never mind Prime Minister. But it's still worth looking back on, because I said to you at the time that this was a moment in which Keir Starmer was full-on forensic lawyer, as opposed to party leader. Let me just refresh your memory.
Mr. Speaker, it was reported this week, including in the Daily Mail, the BBC and ITV, backed up by numerous sources, that at the end of October, the Prime Minister said he would rather have, and I quote, bodies pile high than implement another lockdown. Can the Prime Minister tell the House categorically, yes or no, did he make those remarks or remarks to that effect?
Prime Minister.
No, Mr. Speaker, and I think the right honourable gentleman is a lawyer, I'm given to understand. I think that if he's going to repeat allegations like that, he should come to this House and substantiate those allegations and say where he heard them and who exactly is supposed to have said those. Who exactly is supposed to have said those things, Mr. Speaker? Because what I certainly can tell him, and he asked about the October decisions, they were very bitter, very difficult decisions, as they would be for any Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker.
Well, somebody here isn't telling the truth. The House will have heard the Prime Minister's answer, and I remind him the Ministerial Code says, and I quote, "Ministers who knowingly mislead Parliament will be expected to offer their resignation." I'll leave it there for now. Turning to another issue, there'll be further on this. Believe you me.
I remember. Do you remember now? I've played it to you a few times, because he doesn't do that very often. He never shows any ankle, so to speak, Keir Starmer. But he knew he was onto something there. And it fits neatly with Jeff's analysis from Norwich a moment ago about the way they lied, the way that Johnson represents more than anybody else the complete normalisation of blatant lying in high office, in his case, the highest office. It's just, not nostalgic, but we spend a lot of time describing Johnson's modus operandi when it comes to telling lies, and the way that he would always put the onus back upon the person telling the truth to prove that he was telling a lie. And ultimately you reach that point where unless you can somehow open up his mind and prove that he was lying, he will claim it's not a lie if I didn't realise it was a lie at the time. Ergo, you can go from saying there were no parties to saying, well, apparently there were parties, but I'm absolutely disgusted and I knew nothing about them, to saying, well, actually, it turns out that there were parties and I did know about them. I'm terribly sorry. I certainly didn't attend them. To saying, well, there were parties and I did know about them and I'm absolutely disgusted, but I did actually attend them as well. You have to be a preternatural liar to move effortlessly from throughout all of those positions. But you heard it there. You heard Boris Johnson categorically and contemptuously dismissing the notion that he'd used the phrase, let the bodies pile high. It was the turn of Eddie Lister, one of his consiglieri, both at City Hall and latterly in Downing Street, to appear before the COVID inquiry yesterday. And, well, shiver me timbers, you'll never guess what happened.
And if we could look, please, at paragraph 32 of your witness statement, which is on page 17. You make very much the same point. The R number was rising in September 2020, the proposal for the circuit breaker. However, you say the opposition to any form of lockdown was intense. And then this, you recall the PM saying in September 2020 that he would rather, quote, let the bodies pile high than impose another lockdown. And you go on to say it's an unfortunate turn of phrase. Can you help us with the occasion on which the Prime Minister said this, or to whom he said it?
No, I can't. I can't recall. I mean, it was at one of the many meetings that were going on. I can't tell you which one.
No.
And it should be stressed that Eddie Lister is no sort of civil servant with a grudge or former senior advisor with an enormous axe to grind. He is, I mean, if you were to raid his closet, you would find Boris Johnson T-shirts, I think it's fair to say. So that is an astonishing moment. I mean, in the great scheme of things, it doesn't matter because Johnson's gone and everybody vaguely honest knows what an absolute disgrace he was, is and always will be. But Keir Starmer there, demonstrating statesmanship and demonstrating concern for the truth and concern for the lives of British people in opposition to a Prime Minister who was prepared to let the bodies pile high. But at least we can all agree that he got all the big calls right. Henry Riley has been watching today's proceedings at the same inquiry.
Well, so today, James, it is Lord Sedwill, formerly Sir Mark Sedwill, who has been giving evidence. Just to sort of fill you in terms of who he is in the sort of political soap opera that is the COVID inquiry, he's very much of the Helen McNamara wing. So he's sort of independent, civil service, previously the National Security Advisor, ambassador to Afghanistan. So very much from that wing. Well known that he and Dominic Cummings didn't get on particularly well. The allegation that Dominic Cummings sort of forced him out. He was out as the Cabinet Secretary and head of the Civil Service in September 2020. So pretty early on in the pandemic, and of course the context of Boris Johnson winning that election just over a year after he came to power effectively in July 2019. A number of interesting things that he has said at this inquiry, James. He said when the Conservatives were re-elected in 2019 under that huge majority from Boris Johnson, it felt like an opposition party coming into the government. He also says that in early cabinet meetings, the power was so centralised in Downing Street that he had to remind Boris Johnson actually to talk and to inform other cabinet ministers, saying they were often left in the lurch. They'd come in after perhaps, he cites the weekend, and the policy would have completely changed when it comes to coronavirus and other issues.
There was nevertheless a perpetual tension between Number 10 and Cabinet, was there not?
Yeah, I wouldn't describe it as a tension between them in that Cabinet was formally involved, but as you'll have seen from some of my minutes to the Prime Minister, I did need to remind him of the importance of involving his Cabinet colleagues, not just in the formal decision, but in the formulation of that decision. In this case, it was important just to remind the Prime Minister of the need to ensure there was space for his elected colleagues to be fully participative in those.
Now, one person whose name keeps arising, James, as you know, is Matt Hancock. And Mark Sedwill says that in the very early stages, he resisted the idea of a Cobra meeting in January 2020 because there was a fear, not just with him, but with other colleagues, that Matt Hancock was using it as some sort of PR exercise.
Surely not.
Did you receive around that time a formal request from the DHSC, perhaps in the form of its Secretary of State, Mr. Hancock, for a Cobra meeting to be convened?
Yes, I don't recall whether it was a formal request, but certainly I was asked whether a Cobra could and should take place.
Did you accede to that request straight away?
Not straight away. I wanted to ensure that a Cobra, if it took place, was properly prepared. I was concerned that it might be communicated in a form that could be unnerving.
Did you not, in fact, doubt, to some extent, that the genuineness or the aim of the request from the DHSC for a Cobra to be convened?
There had been a practice, or a habit, I think, probably, which had stretched back several years, of Cobras being convened for communications purposes rather than primarily to make decisions that couldn't be made elsewhere. And I felt that a Cobra, which might have been convened primarily for communications purposes, wasn't wise.
May we be plain, please, as to what you mean by communication purposes? Were you concerned that the Cobra was being called by the DHSC for presentational purposes, that is to say, to make a splash about the role of the DHSC, perhaps its Secretary of State, and that is why you initially hesitated?
That is a fair summary of my thinking, Mr. Keith.
He's also confirmed that the idea of stopping the virus or containing the virus at an early stage actually wasn't thought through because there were so many other operations that hadn't been put in place.
None of those plans in any way deal with the control, stopping the virus from entering the United Kingdom and then spreading throughout the community. Was that understood or appreciated at all?
No.
And that sort of bullish nature that Helen McNamara spoke about in Downing Street, that it was going to be world-beating, and what is referenced by Hugo Keith, who's the counsel to the inquiry that you hear speaking as well, on the 6th of February, a cabinet meeting whereby Boris Johnson, again, sort of oozed that confidence.
The Prime Minister said that confidence was also contagious and it was important the government remained measured in its response. The Secretary of State for Health and Social Care had taken the right tone. Often the significant economic damage of a crisis came from political overreaction rather than the problem itself. This had been true of bovine spongiform encephalitis. The tenor of that cabinet meeting, therefore, Lord Sedwill, appears to have been, it's all right, we mustn't overreact, play it cautious.
Well, you see how the Prime Minister summed that up. If you look earlier in that cabinet minute, it is still the case that the scientific advice is essentially suggesting that the worst case scenario is unlikely, is indeed very unlikely. And so that undoubtedly will have informed the way ministers were thinking about this.
And Baroness Hallett has intervened on a few occasions because essentially Lord Sedwill of the view that there was the reasonable worst case scenario put to ministers, and what she is concerned by, and has said this pretty openly, is why wasn't the most likely scenario put to ministers rather than just the reasonable worst case at all times. And he concedes that was a mistake on his part, partly as being the Cabinet Secretary, head of the Civil Service. Lastly, James, what I think we will hear later on as well is one of the accusations from Dominic Cummings about Lord Sedwill was this idea of, quotes, chickenpox parties, whereby there would be, that's what it says in the tin really, but the idea of people having that sort of herd immunity and catching the virus.
Chickenpox party. So it's what was the biggest thing there for you? Just the general air, the mood, the attitude. Again, as with Helen McNamara, the idea that the things that we presumed they'd be prioritising were barely getting a look in. We're very late for the news. Do not answer that question. 5 minutes after 12, you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I think we will. I think we'll just go off on a slightly unexpected tangent now. It's a story that really appealed to me because. Well, it was about me. Not me, literally. It's about you as well. But I recognised this one. The number of parents who can't help their children with their homework. How do you think we should do this? Because I thought we might do it like a mini mystery hour. But then I don't think you'll be able to remember the homework question that you couldn't help your children with, will you? You won't, because we had quadratic equations not long ago, and might as well have been in Chinese, Mandarin. I have no clue. I remember struggling with them when I was doing my O-level in maths, but goodness me. Also, would that work on the radio? Explaining how to do quadratic equations? I'm not sure it would. But I do quite like that idea. So the story is about the percentage of mums and dads who would probably fail their secondary school exams if they had to take them again. I'm not amazed by that statistic. I'd fail every exam I've ever sat, I think, if I had to sit it again today. I haven't done any revision. I didn't do much the first time round, but I did some. The idea that if I went into my undergraduate exams now, I wouldn't be able to spell some of the names of the people that I studied. So I don't know how big news it is that the majority of us, or half... In fact, I don't believe the other half. You honestly think you could sit down and pass the exams that you passed 30 years ago, pull the other one, it's got bells on. Absolute nonsense. Long division, the elements of the periodic table, and even the dates of the 2 world wars, I think I could probably get them right, are among the things that parents have forgotten from their school days. So it hinges upon the amount of help that you're able to give your secondary school children when they're doing their homework. About a third of us, 34%, can't help their primary school age children. That's just not good enough, folks. You can't. What do they do at primary school? Fronted. What are they called? Fronted adverbials or something like. Have you ever come across a fronted adverb? I think, are they called fronted adverb? There was a couple of things that popped up at primary school that I had never heard of before, but I did Google and sort of work out what it meant and help a bit. So I'm drawn perhaps to the background noise of you ringing in with the thing that your children's homework baffled you and someone else ringing in to help. And I may let you talk to each other. This isn't going to work, is it? I'm doing that thing again. I'm being too ambitious. Well, look, nothing ventured, nothing gained. This isn't the main topic. Partly because you probably can't remember what it was that you couldn't do. But if you can remember the time that you couldn't help your child with their homework because it was so difficult, right? And you can also remember what it was that you couldn't help them with, then 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. If you can remember a time, not the time or the only time, just a time that you couldn't help your child, the younger the better, because the younger the child, the more we can laugh at you. You can remember a time that you couldn't help your child with their homework, and you can also remember what it was you could not help them with. The number you need is 0345 6060 973. Trigonometry, perhaps, will feature. And then if someone does ring in, and frankly, I'm not overly hopeful, but you never know, if someone does ring in with something that they can remember not being able to help their children with during their homework, then you can ring in and do it for them. Like a sort of mini mystery hour. We'll have mystery hour proper tomorrow. Fret not, friends. Mystery hour, well, God willing, will be unfolding as normal. But I thought this might be a nice way of bringing a similar vibe into the otherwise rather heavy-going news agenda. And of course, it doesn't have to be the specific question. It could be, the phrase fronted adverbial, if that is indeed the correct phrase. You could just say, I don't know what a cosine is, James. And I couldn't help my child with their trigonometry because I didn't know what a cosine was. And then someone else will ring in and explain to you what it is. I quite like this. This is coming very early. I think we've already got a winner. This is a 4-year-old. My 4-year-old was sad last night because the dinosaurs died, James. Oh, man. That is sad now. You come to mention it. If you're a child and you love dinosaurs, and they do love dinosaurs for some reason, there's a lot of children's programmes. There's one involving a bucket. There's a bloke who keeps a load of dinosaurs in his bucket. That's a good one. And you've developed a deep passion for dinosaurs during your early years. And then you reach that moment at the age of 4, the tender age of 4. So young and so untender. You get to the tender age of 4 and you discover that the whole bloody lot got extinctified. They've all died. Every single one of them. You'd say, what, every single one, Dad? Yes, son. Every single dinosaur? Yes, son. Even the Diplodocus? Yes, son. Oh, my God, what happened? And my anonymous texter responds by saying, my mind went blank. So we've got a winner. Someone has failed to help their 4-year-old with a simple question, albeit probably not about homework. My 4-year-old was sad last night because the dinosaurs died. I think that's the first line of a poem. I think that's absolutely beautiful. Sometimes words come together in a way that just provides an emotional delivery. My 4-year-old was sad last night because the dinosaurs died. She asked me how it happened, and I was terrified. I simply could not remember the cause of their demise, and I will never forget the disappointment in her eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. That was straight off the top of my head. So it was a meteor, wasn't it? Or is it still debated? Is there still some dispute over how the dinosaurs died? But the idea of them all dying is absolutely heartbreaking. Quadratic equations are simple if the child is given confidence in capital letters, says Bernard in Newcastle, by the maths teacher. Unfortunately, this is a very good point, Bernard, although it's a little perhaps off-piste. So many people are proud, in capital letters, of being useless, in capital letters, with arithmetic, in capital letters, and other parts of the mathematics syllabus. It always astounds me how the statistics for pass rates, in capital letters, are where they are, as they have to be fiddled, in capital letters, in my opinion. That's from Bernard in Newcastle. I hear you. I think that there is indeed a misplaced pride in being rubbish at maths, which I used to, I think, indulge in myself, whereas in retrospect it's just a really silly thing to do. Hi, James. Not all dinosaurs died, some became birds. Well, that doesn't really work when you're explaining it to a child. Also, they didn't become birds, like a magical spell. For 1 minute you're a dinosaur and the next minute you're a bird. The lineage of a bird back to the dinosaurs is easier to track or easiest to track, but dinosaurs didn't become birds. That would be a very complicated thing to explain. You're basically now trying to explain evolution to a 4-year-old who's still sad about the fact that all the dinosaurs have died. So I don't really think that's particularly helpful. You can tell them that birds are dinosaurs. You can do that if you want. Birds are effectively dinosaurs. But apart from the pterodactyl, the little lad or the little girl isn't going to give a monkeys about dinosaur birds. He wants to know about Tyrannosaurus rexes and Diplodocus, if that is indeed the plural of Diplodocus, or Diplodocus, as perhaps you would say if you had the Latin. Hocus pocus, I'm a Diplodocus. So there it is. Shall we do it? Shall we see if this works? What got you stuck in your child's homework, and then someone else listening in will be able to help you out with it. Let's start with Gary, who's in Chingford. Gary, what's it going to be?
Hi, James.
Hello.
So my son is in year 3, and I'm a kinesthetic learner, so asking these sort of questions to me do not work. So I got asked this question. Me and my partner tried to dissect it, but we ended up in a WhatsApp group to try and get the answer.
Yeah.
So here's the question for you.
Go on.
Zach counted in steps of 50 from a number less than 50 and finished on 993.
Yeah.
Here's the first question. What number did he start on?
Yeah.
The second one, which digit was in every number that he said?
Okay.
I've got the answer, but I still don't get it.
Well, how can you not get it?
Cannot get it.
So what number did he start on? Well, look, take the 900 out of it.
Yep.
And then take the 50 out of it, and he starts on 43.
Correct, yep.
And what number is in every iteration to get you all the way to 993? So 43 plus 50 is 93, plus 43 is 143, it's 3.
Yep, but my brain couldn't comprehend it.
Oh, right, thank you very much. Oh, I'm loving this, Gary, already. This is the best feature we've done on the programme in years. I'm feeling 10 feet tall. What does kinesthetic learning mean? I've come across the phrase, but you link it to physical activity, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So I can watch something. So I'm more of a labour-intensive guy.
Yes.
I'm an estates person. I can watch something. I can watch you do it. but actually reading something and trying to break that down. So if you gave me an instruction manual and explained to me how to do something, I couldn't do it. If I watched a video, I'd pick it up like that.
What? And I don't want to, embarrass you, but what did your child think when they realised you couldn't help them?
Nothing really.
Were they all right with it? It wasn't like a moment. It wasn't the moment you realise your dad doesn't know everything. It's quite a moment in your life.
Well, actually, it's not me. It's my partner, and she works in banking as well. So that's even more embarrassing.
Let's leave it there before you damage the share price. It's 12:16. It is 19 minutes after 12. Every day's a school day. Chris in Nottingham says, wow, I've just learned that I am actually a kinesthetic learner. That's lovely, Chris. I love that. That's quite a moment. We are discussing the increased incidence of parents who can't help their children with their homework. I was going to do it like a proper grown-up radio presenter and ask whether or not we are differently, worse and or better. Well, it can't be worse and better, but are we differently educated, more poorly educated or better educated than our children? But then I thought, well, why don't we actually focus on the things that we got stuck on and see if we can unstick ourselves? Trigonometry comes top. Pythagoras' theorem comes second. I remember Pythagoras' theorem, but I don't know if I could actually do it now. That's SOHCAHTOA, isn't it? So SOH, sine, opposite hypotenuse, cosine, adjacent hypotenuse, tangent, opposite and adjacent. SOHCAHTOA. How to calculate pi? No idea. Do you know how to calculate pi? Can you calculate pi? You were in top set, weren't you? I can't calculate pi. I mean, at 3.141 something. But how do you calculate it? You'd need the measurements of a circle and something to do with radius. The periodic table. How to convert fractions. I think I can do that. Long division is tricky. How to ask for directions in French. C'est facile. Comparative and superlative adjectives. That's issimous, isn't it? That's like the best and the... Anyway. On we go. If you got stuck, we can help. John's in Exeter. John, what happened?
If a bat and ball cost £1.10...
Right. It's all maths, isn't it, so far? And I got the last one. I know I'm supposed to be getting calls to answer them, but I'm going to have a go at this. Yeah, £1.10.
Bat and ball cost £1.10.
Yeah.
And the bat is £1 dearer than the ball.
Yeah.
How much is the ball?
Bat and ball is £1.10. And it's 10 pence, isn't it? Is it not?
No.
Hang on. Let me try
That's
again.
what I said.
Let me try. The bat and the ball cost £1.10, so 110. And so x plus y equals 110. And x minus y equals 10. Is that right? X minus y equals 10. No, I'm going to... Well, do you want to answer it yourself or shall I leave it up for someone else to do? What year is your child? How old is your child?
Well, 7 when he answered the question, or asked me to answer the question. I couldn't get it either. I said 10. Your researcher got it.
How really? How embarrassing.
Yeah, I know.
How even Keith got it right. This is well done, Roxy. What age is your child, did you say?
Was 7 when he was asked the question. Yeah.
7! I can't believe. Okay, let me try. Do you get this? You just get a form of blindness now, like a sort of number blindness. Like I know it obviously it's really easy if a 7-year-old can do it.
Well, a 7-year-old can do it. I couldn't, but your researcher could. And did you say Keith's just got it as well?
That's what he says, but you can't always try. So it's £1 dearer. No, that's no £1.10. So bat and ball is £1.10. The bat is £1 more than the ball. How much is the ball? No, go on, tell me.
5p.
Yeah. 5p. Take away the pat. Yeah, of course it is. Show you're working.
Yeah, catch you later.
No, I mean it. Show you're working.
Well, 5p plus £1 and 5p for the bat makes the bat £1 dearer than the 5p ball.
Yeah. What does 10p make it? It means that it would...
Except it doesn't work, does it?
No, it doesn't work at all. What a dope! What a dope I am. Well played, John. Nicely done. How did you get the answer for your child in the end?
He came back from school with it.
Oh, he went back to school. Good Lord, 7 years old, and you've already let him down on such an epic scale, John. I feel for you.
I'm a failure in all departments.
I truly do. 24 minutes after 12 is the time. Oh, it's not the time for the break, is it? Nick's in Worcester. Nick, what have you got?
Hey, James.
Is it maths again?
Yeah,
I'm
unfortunately,
going off
it's
this
math.
topic. This is like motoring all over again. I thought this was going to be great fun, and people would ask about kings and queens. I'm good on kings and queens. Go on then.
Oh, you wish you'd asked about that before.
What have you got?
So our eldest has just gone through the 11 plus.
Okay.
And some of the questions on there were quite mind blowing, and the ones that always stuck in our minds were the dividing fractions.
Yeah.
So one of the questions. that we always
Dividing
remember-
fractions?
Yeah.
What?
You use that daily, don't you?
Do you? Oh, you're being sarcastic. I can do sarcasm. Do you divide? Go on. Well, give me an example. So this is what. This was for the 11 plus, was it?
This is for 11 plus yet. So the question, remember.
Where are you trying to go in Worcester with the 11 plus? Is it RGS?
Ulster Grammar or LGS is a private.
That's what I thought. I didn't know that there were 11 plus schools in Worcester.
Yeah, there's Ulster and there's one in.
Oh, it's a fair off. It's a fair old distance, though.
Yeah, well, you know.
No, he's got. I'm just doing the geography. I'm just putting. I was in Worcester last week. Do you know there's a bloke in Waterstones, Nick, called Paul, who was working in Waterstones when I was working in River Island, just down by. Yeah, he's still there, and that's over 30 years ago. That would be 32 years ago. I was working in River Island in Worcester, and Paul in Waterstones he deserves some sort of medal. And they had my book on the front table as well. So we're big fans of Waterstones. When did it move?
No idea.
You weren't expecting this when you rang in, were you, mate?
I've totally forgot the question now, James.
Well, I'm trying to distract you because I've had enough humiliation for not being able to do 10-year-old maths questions. But go on, what was it? Can you remember?
Well, you've let yourself in for this now. This is 21 over 22.
21 over 22.
Divided by 3 over 11.
I haven't got a clue.
Enjoy.
Well, hang on. No, so that would be 7 over 2.
Yeah.
Would it?
Go on, carry on.
So, and then 7 over 2, so 3.5.
Yeah.
Is it?
Well done.
Is it?
Yeah.
Cost my parents about 30 grand a year, that, Nick.
I was going to say, they must... That's private school.
My mum will be looking for a refund if that is very difficult though. But yeah, okay, I remember how to do those now. I just didn't know. This isn't supposed to be me trying to answer. This is how Mystery Hour started. It was supposed to be a feature on the radio involving lots of interaction and people ringing in, but then for a brief period it turned into an appalling ego trip where I tried to answer every question. But the thing about maths is that it draws you in, doesn't it? Darren's in Peterborough. Darren, what have you got?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
Well, I've had a few conversations on different topics, but I was driving down the motorway and I heard you bring this topic up, and it brought up a PTSD twitch with reference to my child who's now in year 5, in year 4, adding 2 3-digit numbers together.
Yeah.
Using a technique called a number line.
Right.
And I could not, for the life of me, work out how this number line worked.
So you're adding together what sort of numbers?
So you're just adding together 2 3-digit numbers.
2 3-digit numbers, yes.
Yep. Using a number line, which is a technique. I can't for the life of me remember what it consisted of.
So we'll say 756 plus.
Yep.
And we'll say, for the sake of argument, 912.
Exactly. So now the technique that they use is a number line, which is they have a line and you put dots on it to get to the answer. And I couldn't for the life of me work out how it worked.
Okay. What's on the line? Do you remember?
I can't remember. It's just certain aspects of the line. Maybe somebody else can come in and...
No, that's what I'm going to do. So it is a way of avoiding doing 6 plus 2 is 8.
Yes,
carry 1.
It's a way of avoiding having one number against the other.
Oh, well, I'm going to change the numbers then because they need to add up to more than 10, don't they, to make it more complicated to do the old-fashioned way. So I'll just...
I
5, 6, 7.
Taught her, being 49 years old, I taught her the way that I was taught.
Yeah.
And she went in. All the answers were correct, but I was actually pulled in by the teacher at the time.
Yeah.
To say, why is she doing it this way and not the way that we've dictated? I said, because this is the way that works.
Well, it doesn't. The other way works, and it obviously takes a lot longer than the number lines. I'm not sure you're helping here, Darren.
I actually got her to add six-digit numbers together instead of just the 3. She was doing it perfectly fine on the whiteboard that I provided in her bedroom.
But she was doing it the old-fashioned way.
Exactly, which came out with exactly the same answer, which was 1,000,000 times quicker and lots easier.
Well, I don't think it was easier, but we will find out. Someone will tell us how number lines. Someone will tell us I'm adding 567 to 789. I would do it the old-fashioned way. but you can do it using number lines, and I need you to explain what a number line is. So it's about 73% of parents who end up arguing with their children over homework. 87% believe schoolwork has become more challenging than the work we did when we were at school. A further 77% believe their children work much harder than they did at the same age, and parents struggle with maths more than with any other subject. So if you turn to the school, 19% of parents say that they had requested help from their child's school, while 39% said that not enough support was provided. So if you can't help, we just move it slightly beyond the mediocre maths questions that I can't get right. I need to know what a number line is, 0345 6060973. But also, if you can't help your child with their homework, what happens next? Does the school step in, or do you just get lots of red marks all over your exercise book? It's 12:30. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines. 12:34 is the time. How do you add two 3-digit numbers to each other using a number line? 0345 6060973. I quite like this story. I don't know how you managed to do it, Sarah, in Durham, but you managed to tell this story without sounding boastful, which is probably something I could learn from. James, I was renowned in my family for being rubbish at maths. I tried to help my son add fractions, and I couldn't remember how to do it. His response was, "I'll ask my dad." I was devastated. I decided to go back to college and resit my foundation GCSE maths. I passed with a grade 5 and came top in the college for that level. My son now prefers to do his maths homework with me. I like that a lot. And I was just thinking that the reason why it's all maths is because you can Google everything else pretty much these days, can't you? You know, what were the names of Henry VIII's wives? Or how was an oxbow lake formed? I don't know what homework looks like these days. And my girls didn't really ask me for much help, which speaks volumes, I suppose. But you'd have thought that most things you could find online relatively easily, but maths is comprehension. You can stare at the numbers and not see the solution. Beverly probably disagrees slightly. She says, formation of coves, arches and stacks and stumps in Key Stage 1 geography. I am a geography graduate, James, and a former geography teacher. I studied these at A-levels, albeit a long time ago, and I simply can't imagine how to convey it to children who are 5 or 6 years old, many of whom have never even seen the sea. Well, unless I'm missing something, Beverly, could you not just draw a picture and explain what has happened on that one? I'm not sure. 36 minutes after 12 is the time. Kevin's in Liskeard in Cornwall. Kevin, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello, Kevin.
It's great to talk to you. I love the show. And
Thank you, mate.
I particularly like the very clinical analysis of what this shower have done to this country over the last
Gave
13
Keith a heart
years.
attack then when you strung out that sound there, but thank you very much.
Yeah. I'm like yourself. I'm bumbling along, trying to be a good dad, and I've tried on countless occasions to help my daughter with her homework. She's 17 now, and she's in the final year of A-levels.
Yes.
I almost gave up a few years ago when I was a head teacher. I'm a retired head teacher, primary school head teacher. I was a head teacher for 22 years.
Oh, okay.
And every time I try to help her with her homework, I get sort of doors shut. You know nothing about it.
There's a level of frustration kicks in, doesn't it?
Yeah,
yes.
But on top of that, it's you know nothing about education, Dad.
Oh.
It's changed since you were in it.
When did you knock it on the head?
About a year ago.
You know nothing. You're making it up.
Yeah,
you haven't got a clue.
And on top of that, I've got a degree in maths. And I love mathematics.
But they do change it. I mean, they do change the way things are done.
Yeah,
and if you
of course
don't
they
do
do.
it the right way, then you're going to get marked down.
Yeah, that's the nature of this government. And that's the reason I got out. You know, the amateurs fiddling on with things they haven't got a clue about.
Faffing about with things that don't need fixing.
And an easy one for pi, it's 22/7.
Oh, thank you. Okay. And that then goes on forever, so 3 point.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't chuckle like that. Don't make me sound stupid.
Not at all.
When did you last offer constructive help to your daughter that was both helpful and welcome?
I offered it all the way through her education till about a year ago, and No, there's no chance she's going to take advice off Dad.
The line has been crossed.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
line- Well, at least she's a chip off the old block if she's doing it for A-level.
Yeah. No, she's not doing maths for A-level.
Oh.
No.
Oh,
She's
I'm
doing
sorry.
drama and history and biology.
Oh, so she's headed off at quite a different direction.
Yeah.
Well, I wish her well. Thank you, Kevin. And thank you for the kind words, mate. That's a lovely thing to say. 12:38 is the time. 22/7, that's quite a good one. It is going to be predominantly maths, but don't remember, you don't have to come up with a question. You can just have a story like Kevin's and a reflection on whether things have got harder, easier, or neither. But Kevin's added a new dimension to that, which is a lot of the problems that parents will have with helping their children with their homework are born of what could be loosely described as tinkering and changing the way we do things when there wasn't really any need to do so, something that Michael Gove and his chief advisor at the Department of Education were often accused of. And do you remember who the chief advisor at the Department of Education was? Dominic Cummings. Nora's on the Wirral. Nora, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, Nora.
I was just saying binary comes up a lot now.
Does it?
In computer science.
Because of coding.
Yes, so year 7, because it's computer science and not just applications and computer studies.
Right.
Comes up a lot. So it's worth knowing about binary if you need to. I found this out last year because I ended up teaching computer science. Long story.
Well, you make it sound like actually you went through the wrong door or something and you thought you were going to be
almost.
Really?
Almost. It was
Gosh.
like that joke about the handyman. So what makes you think you're handyman? Well, and you live around the corner. It was a bit like that.
So you had to teach yourself before you could teach anybody else?
Yes, but then, as luck would have it, my granddaughter came for an afternoon and she brought her homework with her. And she said, "Oh, you'll never be able to do this, Nanny. It's binary. You won't have heard of it." I was like, "Excuse me." So I did it. And it was just, So if you want me to talk you through it, I'm very happy to.
Well, I haven't. No one's presented any problems with binary yet. I feel that this is just an ego trip on your part, Nora.
Yeah. Okay.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. We're all for ego. Well, I mean, how do you? How do you? I mean, I can remember binary. It's just you've got columns of 1, 10, and 100, right? Is that right?
No.
Yeah. No, 1 and 10.
Units,
no, 1 and 10. You've got columns of 1 and 10.
No,
so
1 and 0.
1 and 0.
Yeah.
No.
1.
Oh yeah. No, that's right. So what's the number 7?
1, 10 and 100 is hundreds, tens, and units. That's decimal.
But what's the 7 in binary then?
What's 7?
Yeah, in binary.
Oh God! Right, but you have to do. You'll do a 4, a 2, and a 1. So that's 1, 1, 1.
4, a 2, and a 1.
Yeah.
1, 2,
So if you draw a grid,
well, where does the 3 go?
Grid,
Where does the 3 go? What age group would you be teaching this to generally?
11-year-olds.
Oh, get out of it. 11 years.
And then they go, and now we're doing hexadecimal.
No, we're not doing hexadecimals.
We're not. But,
so what's on the grid?
I'm not living through that again.
See,
right, so when you grid,
yeah.
start from the right.
Yeah.
1, 2, 4. See the sequence?
Yeah.
Right, go on as long as you need to.
8,
and if you've got, so then you've got your binary number, for example, 1001.
Yeah.
Right, so you've got a 1, so you put 1 in the 1 column.
Yeah.
You haven't got a 2.
No.
There's not one of the next one, so 0 under 2.
Ah, yeah.
Another 0 under 4,
yeah.
but there's a 1 under 8.
Yeah. So it's 9.
So you have to write those numbers in the column on the right, and then you do 1 and 8, 9. Still got it.
You have still got it. And it can go on forever, can it? Well, so what comes after 8? 16?
Yeah, it just doubles up all the time.
And that's why it's binary. So when we read that parents fear
it's like binary choice. It's either 1 or 0. The binary is the binary 1 or the other.
It's all coming back to me now. You're a very good teacher. But what's happened here? What's happened here is you've reminded me that when
they didn't keep me on.
What did they not? They let you go.
Yeah.
Well, what was that about?
I was shocked. No, I wasn't shocked at all. I would have been shocked if they kept me on because it's not my subject.
No,
it was just an accident.
When they say that parents think they would fail their exams if they had to sit them today, it occurs to me that that's a very stupid thing to say because you'd need a couple of weeks to revise, wouldn't you, or a couple of months to get you so no one would pass an exam today in a subject that they hadn't looked at for 40 years.
Knowing I was going to make this call, I literally have just had to revise what I taught last year. So
exactly.
There's no way on earth you'd have to revise for at least 2 weeks.
I think, Nora, that everybody ringing this programme should do at least half an hour of prep. I think it would save us an awful lot of embarrassment. I want at least half an hour of homework before ringing into the programme in future. 12:43. Kim's in Brixton. Kim, have you done your homework before ringing into the programme?
Well, I didn't need to because I'm a primary school teacher, so I know how to do it.
I had a book event last night at the Union.
I was there.
Oh, were you there? Oh, thank you for coming along.
There.
Wasn't it an adventure? Wasn't it wonderful?
It was a real adventure. I had to queue a long time, and then I was desperate for the loo by the time I got in. So
you did. I'm sorry about that. I mean, I'm a victim of our own popularity. But there was a teacher queued, a lady queued up, and she said, "Oh, can you sign this for my husband? He hasn't been able to come along." I said, "Why not?" She said, "He's got parents' evening," and I said, "He put parents' evening ahead of coming to see me." And she said, she said he had to. He's a teacher. And I thought, yeah, you can't really bail on parents' evening if you're the actual teacher. What made you pick up the phone today, Kim?
Adding 2 3-digit numbers on a blank number line.
Yes.
Yes.
Go on then.
Would you like to know how to do it and why we do it that way?
No, the first bit first.
Why we do it?
No.
How to do it?
Yes.
Okay. So, can I do it with simple numbers that don't breach 10, because I'm very nervous and I might get it wrong if I try to do a complicated one.
I can't say no now, can I? Although I think you've undermined the fundamental premise of this whole exercise. Carry on.
No,
yes.
Because otherwise you might not understand either.
That's a fair point. Carry on.
Okay, so we would start teaching this in about year 2 or 3, so they're 7 or 8.
Okay.
So let's take 312 and 423.
Yeah.
Okay, so you would draw just a blank line on the board.
Yeah.
And because addition is commutative, doesn't matter which way round you do it, which is not the same for subtraction, you can, and your researcher very kindly, researcher or producer, sorry, pointed this out to me, you can put whichever number you want to the left of the number line. So let's put the biggest number, because I think this is easier. 423 to the left of the blank number line.
This isn't for me anyway, is it? This is for the fellow that rang in who needed help with it. But I'll be your vessel. 423.
Yes. Now, you think when you're adding numbers, you partition the numbers into their place value columns. So because we've got 3-digit numbers, we've got hundreds, tens, and we used to call them units, but we now call them ones.
Yeah, okay.
For sake of argument. So we're going to start with the hundreds column, which is not what we would do with the old-fashioned method.
No.
So we've got 423, and in the number we're adding to it, we have got 312.
Yeah.
So we've got 400 in the hundreds column, and we are going to add 300 to that 400.
Yeah.
So what's 400 plus 300?
700.
So we've now got
It's amazing.
723.
Yeah.
So we write that on our blank number line. So we've now got 723.
Right.
Then we go to the tens column, where in our biggest number we've got 723.
Yeah.
So we then go to our smaller number, where we have got in the tens column 110.
Yeah. So we add
which we're going to add 110 to our 2 tens. So now we've got 733.
Yeah.
And then we go to our ones column, where we've got 3 ones at the moment, and we're going to add 2 ones. So we then got 5 ones. So our answer is 735.
Right. How are you feeling today? Are you feeling quite robust?
Okay. Yes.
I think that was a complete waste of time.
I know. I knew you were going to say that.
How? How did you know I was going to say that? You're a maths teacher, not a clairvoyant.
That's what. When we send homework home, all the parents say, "Why are you doing it like that?" Just like
No, it's a waste of time because the numbers, there was no carrying. So there's no point to it.
All right. And do you want me to explain why the children are taught that way?
Yeah, I think you better.
Okay. So the children are taught that way because if we go straight to what we call the column method.
Yes, on top of each other.
Which is the condensed column method, which all children will end up doing in the end. They have no idea of why they are doing that. So they do not understand place value, which is the fundament of our number system. So unless they understand what they are doing, why they are, I mean, obviously with the numbers we've used, there's no carrying.
No.
But if you imagine doing this method with carrying, they would then absolutely understand that, say we had in there, if they were adding numbers, say in the ones column where they had a 9 and a 3,
Yeah.
which obviously gives us 12, and they were just saying put 2 in the ones column, carry 1.
Yeah.
If you go straight to that method, it's very hard to instill in them, most children, why they are doing that, because it's such a rote method they don't really understand. So we
Are
start
you
with
sure?
this method.
Are you sure about this?
With most children, yes.
Okay, I'm going to have to take
Yeah,
your word for it.
yeah.
That took a lot longer than I was expecting, and I'm not much the wiser, Kim.
No, okay. Well,
But it's
fair
not
enough.
your fault. I know how to do it now, but I don't.
But we don't. I mean, in the school that I worked in, we didn't use the blank number method. We didn't use that method because and now I'm being perfectly frank. The idea is to instill in children a deeper understanding of the way numbers work.
Okay,
And
I've got to
be
go
honest,
because I tell you how numbers work. I'm 4 minutes late for the break.
It confuses the bejesus out of a lot of children.
Well, okay, fair enough. I think possibly. Thank you, and thanks for coming along last night. It was one of the most amazing nights of my life. Actually, it was truly, truly magical. 12:49 is the time. 12:53 is the time. I don't know if you heard that little advertisement a moment ago where it said join Katie Brethwick and Sam Pittis because they've got an exciting new podcast out. Well, I thought it was an order. So here they are. How lovely to see you both.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you. And you are launching your new podcast, You're Wrong About ADHD. Can I say briefly how proud I am of you both? Because
that's very kind to say.
well, people don't understand how global works sometimes because there's a lot of radio stations in this building, and you both used to read the news on LBC and do a bit on LBC News, and now you're big shot Classic FM presenters.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well, yeah,
It's
I
been
don't know.
beautiful.
Thanks for saying it.
We watch you fly off into the world and
set us
flourish
free.
and thrive, and now you've got this fantastic new project. Where did it come from, Katie?
Well, funnily enough, the Classic FM studio, actually, because we found ourselves, as you do, with the presenter before you or after you, on air in a soundproof studio very late at night. And I shared this news that I had just been diagnosed with ADHD with Sam, and I was quite relieved and, I'll admit, overjoyed actually by my diagnosis because it explains so much to me in middle age. Sam had a
It's
really
fair to say I
different
don't
experience.
entirely share those sentiments, yeah.
And Sam was crestfallen, weren't you?
Yeah, I think so. I think, there were lots of things through my life that didn't quite work, and I had an answer, but at the same time, suddenly you're looking back at your whole life going, what could have been different if I'd been diagnosed younger? What parts of this are me? What parts of this are the ADHD? What do I do in the future if this, problem behaviour continues?
What prompted you to seek the diagnosis, and how easy was it to get one? So.
I had found for my entire life, I'd had periods of depression. I had found myself being physically quite uncomfortable, and which sounds very strange, but actually from a young age, I would find that I'd have a week at school, and I probably was the typical hyperactive boy at school, but every weekend was then spent pulling at my shirt or scratching at my hair, essentially having a sort of emotional crash, and often having to shut myself away. This went on into adulthood, and I would find that I'd do a week at work and I'd get through work and then I'd have to shut myself away all weekend to recover. And I had no idea what this was, and I didn't necessarily know that this was abnormal. I knew it wasn't great, but I managed. I had depression, I was treated for it. And then when I was married, suddenly somebody else saw this and said, yeah, actually, this isn't what everybody else goes through. And a very friendly, gentle counsellor suggested to me to seek an ADHD diagnosis. And one of the big problems, as I'm sure you're aware at the moment, is getting that diagnosis. Yes. And I was able to use what's called the right to choose pathway. So at the moment, there is anything between 2.5 to 10 years waiting around the country to get an ADHD diagnosis. For children, it's 5 years maximum. And one of the things that people can do is go to their GP and say, I want to get some treatment from a private provider that the NHS pays. But with that is the brick wall of whether the GP understands it, whether the GP's prepared to do that. And also then, once you've had that referral, going through the assessment process, which is very difficult. It is poring over your life and digging up things from when you were younger. And then there's a question of going through a sort of a medication process. And I think one of the struggles for so many people at the moment, one of the reasons we wanted to do this podcast is, I think there's a sense that this is just about memory or just people being a bit forgetful.
Naughty boys at the back of the classroom.
Of course.
Which I definitely was, but there's a lot more.
But you also weren't.
And there's a lot more to do with, real crippling emotional and physical struggles for people. And when people are being asked to wait years for a diagnosis, that can actually have a massive impact on their life.
There's some very dark suicide statistics of one on the waiting list, these men and women waiting for a diagnosis. 1 in 10 men will attempt suicide, 1 in 4 women. And that's what we're not dealing with. And I think people keep talking about there's an overdiagnosis of ADHD. Why are we suddenly talking about this too much? We're not talking about it enough. I believe so many people have been diagnosed with eating disorders, with depression, with anxiety. Actually, they have a much more treatable problem, and that's ADHD. And that would fix all of those things.
So who would benefit most from listening to the podcast, Katie? People who think they've got it, people who've got a diagnosis, all of the above?
I say everybody, because everybody...
People with someone in their life who they love who's got it?
Everybody knows somebody who might benefit from a diagnosis of ADHD. And for me, it has been life-changing. And I know for Sam, it's been more of a difficult journey, but I know the diagnosis has been enormously helpful for you.
All right, Chuckles.
Yeah, right. And I think certainly for our partners too, this has also been a journey. We have to acknowledge that they have come on this with us, and it can be difficult living with someone with ADHD. 1 in 2 marriages break down where one or other the partners.
This is staggering.
Yeah.
So you're putting it all out there personally in the hope
yeah.
of helping others. You're already helping, Mark. Thank you for covering this. My son has just been diagnosed, and we are really struggling. So
I went through the same thing as Mark. My son was diagnosed first, and at that point in his life, he was spinning. It was his final year of school. We were spinning, and we didn't know why he was. And the moment a teacher said to me, "We think it might be ADHD," suddenly it made sense for me. And it changed everything. And of course, then you think, oh, hang on a minute, I've got all of those issues too.
Thank you both for doing it, actually, and for dropping by today to talk about it, because it will fill a very large hole in a lot of people's lives. And you can get hold of You're Wrong About ADHD on Global Player and all other podcast platforms, keeping it quite brief for reasons that are, of course, designed to help people with ADHD. 35-minute episodes, not like full flipping disclosure, which feels like it's gone on forever sometimes. And new episodes dropping every Monday. The first one dropped on the Monday that's just gone.
That's right. There's 3 actually, so there's something to tide you over till next Monday.
That's fantastic. Sam Pittis and Katie Brethwick. It's lovely to see you both, and congratulations on this. It's brilliant.
Thanks,
absolutely brilliant. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back or catch up on Global Player, Rewind Live Radio, or enjoy the whole show podcast. You'll also find all of LBC's shows to catch up on, as well as the world's biggest podcasts, including You're Wrong About ADHD, a global original podcast. Rewind Live Radio on Global Player. Download it for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Swarbrick will be with you at 4, but now on LBC it's Sheila Fogarty. 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 On LBC it's Sheila Fogarty.